Chapter 64. Back to the present. The air in Ice Stone City was filled with anxiety, unease, and excitement. The ignorant commoners didn't know what was going on, but all the nobles knew that it was time for them to fire their arrows. The Duke of St. Hilda's rejection left the nobles with no way out. Orders were passed down, and the army made the final preparations before the battle. A somber atmosphere enveloped the entire city. Tonight, it would be hard to sleep. Knight Khan Sudo was one of those who couldn't sleep. He could only feel his heart beating so fast that it was frightening. After tossing and turning for a long time, Khan decided not to sleep. After putting on his clothes and leaving the house, Khan subconsciously walked towards his uncle's room. "Good evening, Lady Penny." Khan hurriedly greeted the female housekeeper of the Oman family. "Good evening, Knight of Khan. Are you looking for the Count as well?" No. I'm just looking around." Khan hurriedly denied. He knew that Lady Penny was the housekeeper of the Oman family on the surface, but in reality, she was Count Oman's lover. And she wasn't just any lover. It was said that Count Oman had taken a liking to Penny not only because of her beauty, but also because of her wine-red pupils. The pupils of humans in this world were usually blue, black, or green. Wine-red pupils were rarely seen. As for Count Oman himself, his eyes were of the same color. To Count Oman, who didn't know much about genetics, although Penny was of low birth, for her to have pupils of the same color as his, she might be the descendant of some ancient bloodline. Regardless of whether this rumor was true or not, Penny's position in the Oman family was very high. This was a fact. Even the illegitimate child she gave birth to, Vala, was more important than other illegitimate children. Not only did Count Oman allow him to be baptized as a knight, he also spent a great deal of effort to help him marry the daughter of a baron, Colin's sister, Caitlin. That was why Khan was so respectful to a housekeeper. Moreover, he realized that Lady Penny was most likely going to the Count's room too, thus, Khan tactfully chose not to disturb the Count's mood. After bidding farewell to Khan, Penny went to Earl Oman's room and entered. When Count Oman saw Penny enter without even knocking, he didn't reprimand her. "Has everything been arranged?" "Yes," Penny answered casually. Then, he stepped forward to help Count Oman undo the buttons on his shirt. Earl Oman kissed the woman's forehead, and then began to help her undress. The Count's wife had been dead for many years, and he had never remarried. Instead, he acted more like a couple with his lover, Penny. If outsiders saw this scene, they would probably be very confused. How could a count treat a lowly lover like this? Even if Penny used to be a peerless beauty, now that she was over 40 years old, it was impossible for her to still be so attractive to the Count, right? Or were those wine-red pupils really that noble in the eyes of the Count? If that was really the case, then all the commoner girls with wine-red pupils in the northern frontier would probably gather in Fallen Eagle City. However, Count Ullman did not seem to feel that there was anything wrong with his treatment of a commoner. Penny also seemed to be taking it for granted. "What are you worried about?" Count Oman saw the worry on Penny's face and suddenly asked. "Nothing." Penny avoided the Count's eyes. Count Oman reached out and pinched Penny's chin, turning her gaze to him. "You have to believe me. This is our best and only choice. But you are helping the House of St. Hilda consolidate its rule." Penny's eyes were filled with reluctance. "There's no choice. Back then, when Marquis Garcia chose to pursue the trolls in the north instead of going south to Winter Castle, our plan had already failed. I don't know what agreement the two brothers reached, but Marquis Garcia actually resisted the temptation of becoming the lord of the northern frontier and was willing to be his brother's sword. Moreover, it's that idiot Gombik's fault. An army of 300,000 was wiped out by 50,000. What a disgrace. In this situation, I have no choice but to follow the Duke of St. Hilda's secret order and cooperate with him to clean up the disobedient lords." Penny did not speak, only silently helping Count Oman unbutton his clothes. Seeing this, Count Oman was unhappy and asked again, "Did someone come looking for you?" Penny's hand paused, then she nodded lightly. Count Oman's eyes flashed, and he said in a low voice, "Don't believe those trolls. Remember, we are only using them, and they are also using us. Don't treat them as your own people. It's not the trolls." Penny shook her head, staring into Count Oman's eyes. "It's a letter from my brother." Count Oman's eyes narrowed. "What did he say?" "He said." Penny's eyes flashed with a hint of scrutiny. "He said, you are betting on both sides, nonsense." Count Oman snorted coldly, placing his hands on Penny's shoulders and pulling her in front of him. "Don't tell me you don't believe me either." Penny stared at her man for a long time before softly spitting out 2 words. "I believe you." Count Ullman felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders as he hugged Penny tightly. "Don't worry, I will definitely do what I promised you. Go to sleep." The next morning. The atmosphere in Ice Stone City had reached its peak. Groups of soldiers passed through the streets and gathered outside the south gate. At this time, even the slowest commoner realized that something was about to happen. They immediately ran home and shut their windows, not daring to go out again. At the same time, 5 kilometers south of Ice Stone City, the silhouettes of an army appeared. The Golden Lion flag shone brightly under the sunlight. That was the House of St. Hilda's direct army, Golden Lion Army. And to the west of Ice Stone City was a black ocean. There was also an army there, the Black Cavalry. Dense killing intent filled the fields, causing the temperature in the air to drop. Count Dawson stood in front of the Black Cavalry formation, looking at the Golden Lion Army and the Feudal Lord Alliance Army in the distance. No one knew what he was thinking. At 9:00 in the morning, after the last round of negotiations had failed, an ear-piercing bugle sounded. The vanguard of the Golden Lion Army and the Feudal Lord Alliance Army gradually approached each other. Then, battle cries echoed through the fields. Count Dawson looked at the 2 sides fighting in the distance with a calm expression. He was waiting. When the main forces of both sides were completely entangled, they would not be able to easily break away. Finally, when it was almost noon, the battle between the Golden Lion Army and the Feudal Lord Alliance Army had reached its climax. Overall, the Feudal Lord Alliance Army had the upper hand. After all, they had the advantage in numbers. And at this time, Count Dawson, who had been watching coldly from the sidelines, finally gave the order to attack. The wildly galloping warhorses caused the earth to shake. The thunderous sound of horse hooves struck everyone's hearts, causing them to involuntarily turn to look at the cavalry that had suddenly entered the battlefield. Those who had never faced the charge of the Black Cavalry would never be able to imagine what kind of scene it was. In the past, the Black Cavalry's targets had always been the trolls, but this time, there were finally humans blocking their path. When the soldiers of the Feudal Lord Alliance Army saw this scene, they immediately shouted in excitement. Because the Black Cavalry was charging towards the Golden Lion Army's formation. However, before they could be happy for long, they saw the Black Cavalry's path suddenly turn, and then, like a flood breaking through a dam, they charged towards the right wing of the Feudal Lord Alliance Army. Boom! The situation was instantly reversed. Chapter 65. Outside Ice Stone City, the thick smell of blood had yet to dissipate. Countless vultures were having their own carnival here. It had been 3 days since that tragic battle, but the atmosphere in Ice Stone City was still extremely stifling. In the plaza in the center of the city, corpses were gathered together and prepared to be burned. They were once important figures in the northern frontier, noble and elegant nobles, lords who ruled over a region. But now, they were being dragged around like dead dogs and thrown into the fire. This is the fate of the traitors. In the plaza, an officer was loudly reading out the crimes of these lords and nobles. The surrounding citizens watched all of this with fear and excitement. They couldn't understand why these nobles would betray the Duke of St. Hilda, whom they were loyal to. But, when they saw the high and mighty nobles being beaten to the ground, their hearts were filled with an indescribable joy. Colin stood in the middle of them and looked at the strange and familiar faces in the plaza. He couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. The two brothers of the House of St. Hilda were truly ruthless. Nearly 100 feudal lords were slaughtered like chickens. "Colin, let's go. The knighting ceremony is about to begin, you can't be late," Caitlin urged from the side. She wasn't used to the smell of blood here and kept covering her nose. "All right. Let's go." Some people were sad, while others were happy. It was as if this world was always maintaining a balance. When the old lords died, new lords would naturally be born. Perhaps to dilute this somber atmosphere and calm the people, the Duke of St. Hilda decided to hold the knighting ceremony in Icestone City today. Logically speaking, the knighting ceremony in the northern frontier should be held in the Lion's Roar Castle in Winter City. But at this time, no one dared to oppose the Duke of St. Hilda, who was in the middle of a killing spree. The knighting ceremony was held in the main hall of Icestone City's Radiance Church. Colin had come here once before to buy holy water. But now, for this conferring ceremony, this place had obviously been redecorated. The colorful glass had been polished until it was exceptionally bright. Under the sunlight, it reflected a gorgeous luster. All kinds of murals were hung on the walls of the hall. In the center, the statue of the God of Light stood majestically, as if watching every noble present. When Colin came in, the place was already filled with nobles who had come to watch the ceremony. Although there were quite a lot of people and it looked quite lively, Colin knew that most of these nobles were the generals of the Black Cavalry. They were all vassals of Marquis Garcia. There were only a few vassals who were truly loyal to the Duke of St. Hilda, because most of them had become corpses in the square. Apart from Colin, the only ones who could attend were the nobles led by Earl Oman, who had defected at the last minute. However, Colin knew that Earl Oman did not betray at all. This guy was a spy that the Duke of St. Hilda had placed in the allied suzerains. His goal was to incite the suzerains' dissatisfaction and lead them to fight against the House of St. Hilda. In the end, he was buried by the two brothers of the House of St. Hilda. Since 3 years ago, these few true big shots of the northern frontier had already begun to plot, eliminating all external and internal threats along the way in the northern frontier. Today, it was finally over. Colin sighed in his heart. It seemed that the biggest suspect who had plotted against him was still at large. He did not know when he would be able to completely eliminate this threat. Accompanied by the melodious sound of a bell, the Duke of St. Hilda walked into the hall. All the nobles immediately stood up and bowed to welcome the Duke's arrival. It was Colin's first time meeting the master of the northern frontier. He looked to be about 50 years old, and was very fat. His hair was slightly white. Although he tried his best to straighten his back when he walked into the hall, Colin could see that he was not as strong as he wanted to be. Logically speaking, this was not the state that a knight in his prime should be in. However, Colin knew that although the Duke of St. Hilda had once been the champion of the northern frontier, and was even hailed as the 6th-level knight who had the highest chance of entering the Saint Realm among the current generation of St. Hilda's knights. However, 5 years ago, after a duel with the previous giant demon emperor, the Duke was severely injured. From then on, not only did he lose all hope of entering the Saint Realm, he was unable to recover from the setback. His hair started to turn white, his back started to bend, and his body became fatter by the day. The powerful knight of the past had become a fat middle-aged uncle. Honorable lords, brave knights. The Duke of St. Hilda stood on the stage and said in a loud and clear voice. Recently, the northern frontier has not been peaceful. The giant demons have invaded, and the lords have rebelled. However, under the protection of the God of Light, and with everyone's full support and valiant fighting, we have achieved the final victory. Victory! Victory! Timely cheers came from below the stage, and all the nobles applauded and celebrated. The Duke of St. Hilda pressed his hands together and continued, "In order to commend those who have contributed greatly to this victory, I will confer titles to them one by one." Naturally, there was another round of cheers from below the stage. It had been a long time since a new noble had appeared in the northern frontier, and this time, it seemed that a large number of new nobles would be born. After all, so many old nobles had already vacated their positions and lands. Whether it was to appease the people or to better govern the northern frontier, the Duke of St. Hilda had to reward them generously. The first person to receive a reward was indeed the second most important person in the Black Cavalry, Earl Dawson. This trusted subordinate of Marquis Garcia was conferred the title of Marquis by the Duke. He was also the second Marquis by the northern frontier. From now on, Marquis Dawson would also leave the vassals of Marquis Garcia and pledge allegiance to the Duke of St. Hilda. This also indicated that after the Duke of St. Hilda had eliminated the two major threats in the northern frontier, he had finally begun to deal with the third threat, the Black Cavalry. And his method was not out of Colin's expectations, to divide and recruit. After that, as expected, a large number of corps generals of the Black Cavalry were conferred titles by the Duke. These new nobles born from the Black Cavalry, would they continue to listen to Marquis Garcia's orders in the future? Or would they change sides and pledge allegiance to a new master? Finally, Colin's name was announced. His sister, Caitlin, clapped excitedly, as if she was the one receiving the title. Amidst the cheers, Colin strode to the center of the hall and knelt on one knee in front of the Duke of St. Hilda. The Duke raised his long sword in front of him and said with a solemn expression, "Colin Angeli, you have used your courage, wisdom, and faith to prove your loyalty and value to the God of Light and me. Here, in the name of the Duke of St. Hilda, on behalf of the God of Light and His Majesty, I confer upon you the title of Viscount Angeli. I hope that you will use your loyalty and your life to protect this honor." After saying this, the Duke's sword pointed at Colin's head and shoulders. "I, Colin Angeli, swear on the souls of my ancestors that I will be loyal to the God of Light and the Duke of St. Hilda. Your will is my direction, your." As Colin recited the oath, he was pleasantly surprised. Viscounts? It was actually a viscount. Chapter 66. How difficult was it to be promoted from a baron to a viscount? The Angeli family's baron title was obtained by Colin's great-great-grandfather after he fought on the battlefield for half of his life. Since then, even though 3 generations of the Angeli family's barons had fought on the battlefield, and 2 of them had even died on the front lines, they were still unable to promote the family to a viscounts. Of course, this was because there were too many feudal lords in the northern frontier, and their metabolism was too slow. However, it also showed how difficult it was to be promoted. This time, Colin did not expect that not only would he inherit his father's baron title, but he would also be promoted to a viscounts. While he was pleasantly surprised, Colin also realized that his promotion was actually the result of a combination of factors. Firstly, most of the old feudal lords in the northern frontier had been wiped out by the 2 brothers of the House of St. Hilda, and a large amount of land had been recovered by the House of St. Hilda. This naturally made it easier for him to be promoted to a viscount. Secondly, Colin had also participated in the battle against the trolls, and he had gained a lot of credit. Although Colin's role in the battle was very small, and it was not an exaggeration to say that he was just a bystander, the Duke of St. Hilda obviously did not want to give all the credit to the generals of the Black Cavalry. Therefore, Colin was the only noble who was loyal to the Duke of St. Hilda, other than Marquis Garcia, and of course, the Duke would take special care of him. Thirdly, he did not know if Marquis Garcia and Vera had played any role in this matter. If the 2 of them had mentioned Colin in front of the Duke, then it would not be difficult for him to be promoted to a viscounts. In short, this time, Colin was awesome. The Angeli family had taken a big step forward under his leadership, and it was not an exaggeration to say that he had brought honor to their ancestors. Among the crowd, Caitlin was so emotional that tears were streaming down her face. She clenched her fists in front of her chest. She was probably comforting her dead father and asking him to rest in peace. After Colin finished his oath, an attendant walked up with a brand new set of Viscount's formal attire. It was a dark red velvet coat and black trousers. The coat was embroidered with the Angeli family emblem on the chest. Below the emblem were 2 silver stripes, which were the symbol of the title of Viscounts. Colin took it with both hands. Then, the attendant handed over the Viscount's rings and ribbons, as well as a piece of parchment with the seal of the Duke of St. Hilda. On the parchment it was written that the new territory was conferred to the Angeli family. Colin held the pile of items and bowed to the Duke of St. Hilda again before leaving. Caitlin ran excitedly to Colin's side. She could barely contain her joy. But she knew that she had to pay attention to the situation. She only whispered in Colin's ear. "Colin. That's great. Father will be proud of you when he knows. The Angeli family has worked hard for so many years, and we've finally become a Viscount's family. Quick, quick, let me see where the new territory is." Colin looked at his excited sister, but his heart did not waver. After all, he did not have a strong sense of belonging to the Angeli family. Moreover, he wanted to know if his sister was really happy for him, or if she was just pretending. Just as Colin stared at Caitlin carefully, he suddenly noticed that the joy on her face froze. It was replaced by shock and confusion. "What's wrong?" Colin blinked and asked softly. Caitlin unfolded the parchment in front of Colin and asked in disbelief, "Look at the family's new fief. How could it be here?" Colin looked at the parchment in confusion, and then he was stunned. How could it be here? Did she write it wrong? Just as Colin and his sister looked at each other, the conferring ceremony continued. This time, Khan Sudwa's name was called. This eldest son of the Sudwa family, who had some grudges with Colin, walked excitedly to the center of the hall and knelt down on one knee. In the past 2 months, the situation at the northern frontier had changed drastically. To be honest, Khan had been at a loss and fearful. Fortunately, he remembered his father's last words and followed in the footsteps of his uncle, Earl Aldman. That was how he managed to survive this crisis. He had even made a great contribution. In Khan's opinion, if that annoying Colin could be conferred the title of Viscounts, then wouldn't the Sudwa family's title be promoted? However, just as Khan was waiting expectantly for the conferring ceremony, the Duke stabbed his long sword into the marble floor and questioned Khan. "Knight of Khan, tell me, what is loyalty?" "What?" Khan raised his head and looked at the Duke of St. Hilda blankly. The crowd suddenly quieted down. Khan's sister, Cynthia Sudwa, who Colin called crazy woman, was also shocked by the Duke's question. She clenched her fists and instinctively realized that something was wrong. Colin held the parchment in his hand and looked at the stunned Khan. He seemed to have suddenly realized something and a cold smile appeared on his lips. Loyalty, of course it's, what is it? The Duke of St. Hilda's expression was cold, and his sharp gaze seemed to have pierced through the pitiful knight kneeling in front of him. Under such a gaze, Khan only felt that his mind was blank, and he was not even sure what he was saying. The Duke of St. Hilda's tone was extremely cold. "You asked Charles to give up the title of Marquis in front of everyone. Is it out of loyalty? It's over. The Sudwa family is over." This was the thought of all the nobles present. Obviously, the Duke of St. Hilda was digging up old scores. When Khan was pushed out by Earl Oman to stand out, many people guessed that he would pay the price for it. Now, the price had really come. Khan thought that by switching sides with Earl Oman, he would be able to write off his previous offense. But obviously, the Duke of St. Hilda did not intend to let the Sudwa family off so easily. The face and glory of the House of St. Hilda was not something that a small noble could casually trample on. Of course, the real reason why Charles voluntarily gave up his title was because of the pressure from Marquis Garcia. But Marquis Garcia had enough confidence to prevent the Duke's anger from pouring down on him. As for Khan Sudwa, he did not have this ability, so he could only become the Duke's target. Kill the chicken to warn the monkey. Looking at the cowardly Con, the Duke of St. Hilda laughed coldly and suddenly said loudly, "Viscount Colin, tell me, what is loyalty?" Everyone's eyes suddenly turned to Colin. Colin was stunned for a moment, but he quickly strode forward. He seemed to have some premonition about this. "Duke, I believe that loyalty is to give everything you have unconditionally, without asking for reasons, without distinguishing between right and wrong, without considering gains and losses. Without asking for reasons, without distinguishing between right and wrong, without considering gains and losses." The Duke of St. Hilda carefully digested Colin's answer, a hint of admiration and deep meaning flashing in his eyes. Then, he threw the long sword in his hand directly to Colin and ordered, "Good. Then I order you to kill Con Sudwa immediately." "Yes." Before the nobles present could react, and even Con himself was still kneeling on the ground in a daze, Colin had already caught the long sword thrown by the Duke. Then, he swung it without hesitation. Swoosh! A silver light flashed. Blood splattered everywhere. Chapter 67. Thump. Thump, a round head rolled onto the ground. The spurting blood dyed the marble floor with a layer of gorgeous color. The entire place was silent. No one would have thought that a proper knighthood bestowment ceremony would turn out like this. The Duke of St. Hilda's order was very abrupt. And, Colin's execution was even more abrupt. In reality, Colin had already expected the Duke of St. Hilda's order. Because, the Angeli family's new fief had the name Ice Stone City. Since the Su Duo family's fief had already been bestowed to the Angeli family, Colin naturally wouldn't be surprised that the Duke would settle the score with Con at this time. But in the eyes of outsiders, the Duke and Colin seemed to have discussed this beforehand. It was a sudden attack on Con. Even when Con's head rolled onto the ground, the confusion in his eyes didn't even have time to turn into fear. "No!" A shrill cry broke the silence in the arena. Cynthia Su Duo charged forward like a madwoman, as if she wanted to avenge her brother. After Colin swung his sword, he immediately knelt on one knee towards the Duke of St. Hilda. At the same time, he raised the long sword high above his head with both hands. Colin completely ignored Cynthia, who was charging at him from behind. As expected, before Cynthia could reach Colin, she was stopped by a group of guards. "Why? Why? Your Grace, why?" "Colin. I'll kill you, I'll kill you." After the crazy woman was carried out of the hall by the guards, the Duke of St. Hilda smiled at Colin and said, "Very good, Knight Colin. I like your interpretation of loyalty. This sword's name is, Blade of Judgment. 5 years ago, I used it to cut off the head of the last troll emperor. Now, I'm giving it to you. I hope you treat it well and live up to its name and the glory it represents." Colin's heart shook. He put away the long sword in his hand and said loudly, "Thank you, Your Grace, for your reward. I hereby swear that where your will points, is where I swing my sword." The Duke of St. Hilda nodded in satisfaction and indicated that Colin could leave. Then, the knighthood bestowment ceremony continued. However, everyone's gaze was intentionally or unintentionally glancing in Colin's direction. If Colin was promoted to Viscounts, at most, he would receive some envious gazes. Now, when he was given the Blade of Judgment by the Duke, everyone looked at him with unconcealable jealousy. Who would have thought that Duke St. Hilda would place such importance on a newly promoted Viscount? Only Marquis Garcia, who had been silent all this while, furrowed his brows slightly when he saw the long sword in Colin's hand. When the last batch of new barons received their titles, the knighthood bestowment ceremony finally came to an end. However, the Duke of St. Hilda did not seem to have any intention of ending the ceremony immediately. Everyone present was not surprised. They were all holding their breaths as they waited for something. Charles. Finally, the Duke of St. Hilda read out his eldest son's name. Charles, who had been hiding in the back, trembled slightly when he heard this. Then, he walked to the center of the hall as if he was going to the execution ground and knelt down on one knee in front of his father. "I heard that you want to atone for the 200,000 soldiers who died in battle." The Duke of St. Hilda's voice was emotionless. Charles lowered his head and sobbed, "Yes, father. I have let down your expectations, and I have let down the people of the northern frontier and the 200,000 soldiers. Therefore, I am willing to give up my title as a marquis to atone for my mistakes." The Duke of St. Hilda did not speak. He only looked at his eldest son with a cold gaze. Charles did not raise his head, but he seemed to have understood his father's intentions. He slowly took off his marquis ring and removed his belt. Finally, he took off his ceremonial robes, folded them, and placed them in front of him. "Father, please forgive me for my sins." Charles prostrated himself on the ground, waiting for his father's judgment. After a long silence, the Duke of St. Hilda finally spoke. "Charles, from today onwards, the glory of the House of St. Hilda has nothing to do with you. You will head to the northern frontier as an ordinary soldier and fight on the front lines against the trolls for the rest of your life. Until the day the trolls' city is captured." "Yes, father," Charles kowtowed in a daze and stumbled as he retreated. The former first in line to the throne of the northern frontier left dejectedly. The nobles observing the ceremony continued to remain silent. They did not dare to do anything to attract the Duke's attention. Although the Duke's expression was calm, those who were familiar with him knew that the Duke must be full of anger at this time. No one would feel good if they were forced to abolish their chosen successor, not to mention the Duke of the Northern region, who was a man of his word. Obviously, this matter was a great provocation to his authority. However, he could only grit his teeth and swallow it. The atmosphere in the hall gradually became heavy. The ceremony was not over yet. The Lord of the Northern Frontier could not be without an heir. Since Charles had been deprived of his title, naturally, someone had to inherit the title of Marquis. And this person, who could it be? Colin quietly raised his head and glanced in the direction of Marquis Garcia. When they were hunting outside the city, Marquis Garcia had already told Colin about his deal with the Duke of St. Hilda. Therefore, he was very clear that the person who would inherit the title of Marquis should be Vera. Although according to the law, Vera should be ranked after the other two sons of the Duke, if the Duke insisted on making Vera the first in line of succession, no one would dare to object. Oh no, the only one who dared and was qualified to object was Marquis Garcia. However, Marquis Garcia obviously would not object. As for the imperial aristocratic senate, perhaps they could have a strong binding force on ordinary nobles, but they did not dare to interfere with the succession of the House of St. Hilda. Even if Vera's succession was not legal, as long as the Duke of St. Hilda gave a reasonable reason, they would definitely accept it. This reason was very easy to find. For example, the second son was too weak and the third son was too young. In short, when the Duke of St. Hilda and Marquis Garcia reached an agreement, there was nothing in the northern frontier that they could not decide. However, just as Colin was looking forward to hearing Vera's name, another name came out of the Duke's mouth. Adams. Colin suddenly raised his head and looked at the figure in the middle of the hall in shock. What is going on? Shouldn't it be Vera? When the Duke's second son, Adam St. Hilda, heard his father's call, he suppressed the ecstasy in his heart and strode forward, kneeling down on one knee in front of the Duke. In the name of the Duke of St. Hilda, I hereby confer upon you the title of Marquis. I hope that you will not disappoint. Colin was not interested in listening to the rest of the words. He quickly looked in the direction of Marquis Garcia. Then, he saw Marquis Garcia's cold eyes. Betrayal. This was the betrayal of Luo Luo. Marquis Garcia had faced many temptations, but in the end, he kept his loyalty to his brother. However, he did not expect that he would be betrayed by his brother. The nobles who did not know anything were still celebrating for Marquis Adams. Even the ignorant Vera was happy for her brother. However, only Colin quietly lowered his head. The chaos in the northern frontier was far from over. Chapter 68. After the conferring ceremony, everyone left the church one after another. Most of the nobles were overjoyed. After all, this conferring ceremony was the largest in the northern frontier in recent years. The Duke of St. Hilda's generosity had calmed the nobles in the northern frontier. They all believed that the northern frontier would be even better in the future. Colin ignored his sister who was chattering non-stop and purposely stayed behind to chat with Marquis Garcia to test the thoughts of this big shot. Although Marquis Garcia did not flare up on the spot, Colin knew that the Duke of St. Hilda had completely angered Marquis Garcia because he did not keep his promise to make Adams his first successor. If the two brothers were putting on an act before, then the rift between them was real now, and it could no longer be easily mended. To be honest, Colin did not understand why Duke of St. Hilda would break his promise. It was not because Colin thought that Duke of St. Hilda should abide by the virtues of a knight. He was not that naive. Duke of St. Hilda was an old politician who had ruled the northern frontier for decades. Expecting him not to lie was like expecting a man not to cheat. What Colin did not understand was why Duke of St. Hilda would choose to fall out with his brother in such a way at this time. Duke of St. Hilda was too impatient and lacked political wisdom. If Colin was in Duke of St. Hilda's position, even if he did not want to pass the title to Vera, he would not kick Marquis of St. Hilda's position so quickly. At the very least, he would give the title to Vera first and recognize her as the first successor. He would then stabilize Marquis Garcia's position. Then, whether it was slowly weakening the Black Flag army or building up another military force that could compete with them, it would be easier for him. After all, Vera would inherit the title of Marquis of St. Hilda's position and would not immediately become one of the Dukes of the North. She could still be stripped of her title in the future. Why be so impatient now? Of course, Colin didn't think that Marquis Garcia would dare to rebel at this time. After all, most of the feudal lords in the northern frontier had been eliminated, and the remaining ones had been pacified by the Duke. And the Black Flag Army's previous act of betrayal had already caused Marquis Garcia to bear the infamy of a betrayer. Now, even if he stood out to deal with his brother, no lord would respond to his call. As for the Black Cavalry, he had already been roped in by the Duke with the tacit approval of Marquis Garcia. For example, Marquis Dawson, a vassal who was once loyal to Marquis Garcia, would he still admit that he was a member of the Black Cavalry after swearing allegiance to the Duke? Would they still choose to follow Marquis Garcia's orders without hesitation like before? What's more, the matter of the Duke of St. Hilda going back on his word was actually only known to a very small number of people. After all, the deal between the Duke of St. Hilda and Marquis Garcia was originally a secret. If Colin hadn't been regarded by Marquis Garcia as his future son-in-law, and thus learned of the details of this deal, he probably wouldn't have realized that the Duke of St. Hilda had betrayed his brother. If Marquis Garcia chose to rebel now, wouldn't the people of the northern frontier view it as a betrayal of his brother? Would Marquis Garcia be willing to bear this kind of infamy? Sir Marquis. Colin moved to Marquis Garcia's side, and greeted him in a low voice. Marquis Garcia shot a glance at Colin, but didn't say anything. His footsteps didn't stop, and he continued to walk outside. Colin knew that this big shot was in a bad mood, so he didn't dare to say anything more, and followed him out of the church. When they were outside, Marquis Garcia immediately mounted his horse, and then looked at Colin who had followed him out, and said in an indifferent tone, "Tell me, is your loyalty really regardless of reason, regardless of right or wrong?" Colin's heart trembled, and he cursed inwardly. Previously, when faced with the sudden attack of the Duke of St. Hilda, Colin had deliberately interpreted loyalty as unconditional obedience in order to curry favor with the Duke. He didn't expect that Marquis Garcia would misunderstand this. But there was no other way. At that time, how could Colin have predicted that these two brothers would fall out again? At that time, he thought that the Duke of St. Hilda, who had cleared the internal and external threats of the northern frontier, had undoubtedly become the real master of the northern frontier. If Colin wanted to continue to mingle in the northern frontier, develop the Angeli family, and even marry Vera, he must obtain the approval of the Duke of St. Hilda. Therefore, Colin took the initiative to flatter him. Moreover, when he saw his new fief, he had already realized the Duke's plan, and he also had a grudge against the Sue Duo family, so he was mentally prepared to become a knife in the Duke's hand. But who would have thought that the Duke would actually break his promise to Marquis Garcia at this time? This undoubtedly caused the northern frontier, which had just calmed down, to once again have a turbulent hidden worry. Therefore, Colin was once again faced with the choice of side. And this time, he really didn't know which side to choose. Although in his heart, he was more in favor of Marquis Garcia. This was not only because the Marquis had taught him almost everything in the Battle of the Icefield, but also because the Marquis had given him the retired black cavalry soldiers to help the Angeli family form a cavalry. He was really training Colin as his son-in-law. Moreover, from a moral point of view, this matter was indeed the Duke of St. Hilda's fault to his younger brother. He had broken his promise. However, at this moment, facing Marquis Garcia's questioning, Colin didn't know what to say for a while. Should he directly admit that what he had just said was nonsense? In this way, wouldn't his character setting collapse immediately? Who would dare to trust a person who could abandon his oath so casually? Just when Colin was stunned, Marquis Garcia had already left on his horse. Before he left behind one last sentence: "Go and understand the origins of the blade of judgment in your hands, and then reconsider what true loyalty is." Looking at Marquis Garcia's departing figure, Colin stood there blankly for a while, not knowing what to do. Until his sister, Caitlin, walked over with a puzzled expression and brought Colin back to the inn. In the next few days, Ice Stone City was peaceful. Marquis Garcia didn't do anything drastic, as if he had completely forgotten his brother's betrayal. However, on the night of the bestowment ceremony, Marquis Garcia left Ice Stone City. It was as if he didn't want to stay in this city for another second. Marquis Garcia's departure didn't attract too much attention. After all, this Marquis was used to being alone. Moreover, the true master of the northern frontier was still in the city. However, the Duke of St. Hilda didn't stay in Ice Stone City for too long. On the third day after the bestowment ceremony, he set out to return to Winter City. As the new master of Ice Stone City, of course Colin had to go see him off. It was a sunny morning, and a large group of northern frontier nobles gathered outside Ice Stone City's south gate. The one at the front was naturally the Duke of St. Hilda. Beside him was the newly promoted Viscount Angeli. "Colin, are you satisfied with the new territory I bestowed upon you?" "Your Grace, of course I am extremely satisfied." Colin's words weren't completely flattery. Because, the Angeli family's current territory was indeed very large. Originally, the Sue Duo family's territory was Ice Stone City and the surrounding area of about 30 kilometers. However, this territory wasn't directly connected to the Angeli family's original territory. There were also two barons' territories in between. However, these two barons had been beheaded in the previous rebellion, so the Duke simply bestowed these two territories to Colin as well. Thus, including the original Greycastle town, Colin's current territory was the size of the original Viscount's territory and three barons' territories combined. This definitely exceeded the size of a normal Viscount's territory. If it wasn't for the fact that there was too much land in the northern frontier and too few lords, the Duke of St. Hilda wouldn't have been so generous. So, are you satisfied?" The Duke of St. Hilda asked with a smile. Colin blinked and also smiled. Of course not. No lord would be satisfied with the size of their territory. The Duke of St. Hilda laughed loudly, as if he was very satisfied with Colin's answer. After laughing for a while, the Duke said, "Did you know? My grandfather once said something similar." He raised his whip and pointed to the east. "There is no point in going to the ice field in the north. It is too cold and barren. However, if you want to expand your territory, you can try to go to the east. After saying that, he didn't wait for Colin's response and immediately whipped his horse and left. Colin froze in place, wondering what the Duke's last words meant. At this moment, a gorgeous carriage passed by Colin. The curtain of the carriage was lifted, revealing a beautiful face. Colin. Miss Vera. My coming-of-age ceremony is in a month's time. Will you come? Of course, it would be my pleasure. Vera smiled sweetly and put down the curtain. The convoy slowly moved forward and gradually disappeared into the horizon. Colin stood outside the city gate for a long time, but he didn't watch the Duke's convoy leave. Instead, he looked to the east, where the Duke of St. Hilda had just pointed. That was the eastern border of the empire. There was also a small country sandwiched between the northern frontier and the eastern border. The Half-Elf Kingdom. Chapter 69. Following the departure of the Duke of St. Hilda, the rest of the lords of the northern frontier also left one after another. Ice Stone City also became deserted. Of course, this kind of desertion was only relative. Compared to the Angeli family's former fief, Greycastle Town, Ice Stone City was clearly much more lively. The lives of the citizens of the city seemed to have returned to their original trajectory. Although the lord of the city had changed, it didn't seem to affect them much. Compared to who was the lord of Ice Stone City, these citizens were more concerned about whether they had enough food to eat and whether they had enough clothes to wear. However, for some people, this was an earth-shattering change. These people were, of course, the former lords of this city, the Su Duo family. After being stripped of their title and fief, the Su Duo family could only choose to leave quietly. Colin didn't plan on killing the people of the Su Duo family. After all, the unspoken rule of this world was to be lenient towards the losers. Of course, these losers had to be nobles. No one cared about the lives of the commoners. These failed nobles would become wandering knights, using their strength and loyalty in exchange for the lord's shelter. They looked forward to the day when they could use their military exploits to regain their fief and title, restoring their family's glory. This was the world's leniency towards nobles who had lost their power. Because in the eyes of the people of this world, failure was only temporary, but bloodlines were passed down from generation to generation. Only noble bloodlines could give birth to great heroes. And these heroes who could turn the tide were the foundation of the human race in this world. Today, a family was exterminated and the legacy of a noble bloodline was severed. Perhaps, because of this, a hero who could save the human race in the future was killed. Of course, this was not allowed. Therefore, even if it was the Duke of St. Hilda, after executing the rebellious lords, he could only strip them of their titles and fief, but he wouldn't exterminate their family members. Colin obviously didn't dare to break this unspoken rule, unless he didn't want to continue living in the Radiant Empire. However, although he wouldn't exterminate the Su Duo family, there was one person among them that Colin didn't plan on letting go so easily. This person was, of course, the crazy woman who had caused trouble for him time and time again, Cynthia Su Duo. Still can't find them? Yes, Lord Viscounts. Obviously, Cynthia seemed to have expected that Colin would not let her off. Once the ceremony was over, she ran away without a trace. Colin frowned. He also felt that it was a little tricky. If a Tier 3 knight wanted to escape, it would be hard for him to catch him. What about that Su Duo family servant called Sar? I'm sorry, my lord. I didn't find it either. Colin snorted, feeling somewhat helpless. However, he didn't blame Knight Raymond too much. After all, the Angeli family had only recently taken over Ice Stone City and could be considered a standard external force. In addition, Raymond didn't bring many soldiers with him from Greycastle, so sealing off the entire city was simply unrealistic. Forget it, let's not look for it for now. Send someone to Fallen Eagle City to investigate, perhaps Cynthia and Sar will appear there. Don't act recklessly after you find them. Just send someone to keep an eye on them. Yes, Lord. Colin felt that the most likely lord for the Su Duo family to rely on was Count Oman. After all, they were related by marriage. As for how to get them from Count Oman, Colin couldn't think of a way at the moment. Speaking of Count Oman, Colin still hadn't forgotten about the suspect who tried to kill him back then. Even now, he still hadn't figured out who it was. However, the biggest suspect right now was still Count Oman. As for his sister Caitlin. After interacting with her for a few days, Colin felt that she was less suspicious. After all, no one could act so realistically. Moreover, there was still no news of Caitlin's husband, Knight Vala. In Colin's opinion, that guy might have really died in some unknown corner of the battlefield. However, Caitlin obviously wasn't willing to accept this fact. She continued to inquire about Vala from every caravan that came back from the icefield. She even personally made a few trips to the icefield to look for her husband. This was like looking for a needle in a haystack. Colin couldn't persuade her, so he could only let her do as she wished. He was also very busy right now. There were a lot of things in the new territory that he had to deal with. At this time, the person Colin looked forward to the most was the old butler of the Angeli family, Eamon. If he was in Ice Stone City, he would definitely be able to help Colin take care of these things in an orderly manner. Where are Eamon and the others now? When will they reach Ice Stone City? Colin asked this question almost every day. Soon. Probably tomorrow, at the latest the day after tomorrow. Knight Raymond was also somewhat helpless. With this world's communication methods, he couldn't grasp Eamon's exact location in real time. Got it. Go do your work. Colin sighed and didn't make things difficult for Raymond. Yes. After Raymond left, Colin once again buried his head in the pile of documents on the table. After an unknown amount of time, the candles on the table had almost burned out. Colin rubbed his sore eyes and ordered loudly, "Change the candles for me." However, the servant outside the door didn't respond. Colin waited for a moment and called out again, but still didn't receive a response. He frowned, thinking that the guy outside was dozing off again, so he got up and walked towards the door. Click. The moment he pulled open the door, Colin suddenly realized that something was wrong. But just as he was about to quickly retreat, a long sword suddenly pierced through the door, stabbing towards his heart. Bang! In the blink of an eye, Colin immediately leaned back and fell to the ground, dodging the sword. The dazzling holy light surged like a tide, and the wooden door exploded with a bang, sending wood shavings everywhere. Colin hurriedly rolled and quickly got up from the ground. Without looking back, he rushed towards the blade of judgment, hanging on the wall. However, the assassin was even faster. Before Colin could touch his weapon, a sharp pain came from his back. Thump! The injured Colin fell to the ground. However, there wasn't much panic on his face. He struggled to turn his head, leaning against the wall to look at the intruder. It was indeed that crazy woman, Cynthia. Cough cough, did you come to kill me yourself? Or did someone order you to come? Colin asked seriously. Do I need someone to order me to kill you? Cynthia slowly approached Colin, gritting her teeth. Colin was a little disappointed, as if hoping that she was ordered by someone. But he didn't expect that this woman was really a lunatic who didn't care about the consequences. If you kill me, you won't live either. Cynthia laughed coldly, not caring about Colin's threat. Chi! The long sword pierced through Colin's chest. Cough cough. Colin's face was twisted in pain, but he still didn't give up and asked, "Is there really no one who ordered you to kill me? Not even Earl Oman?" Cynthia obviously didn't expect Colin to be concerned about this before he died. She shook her head and laughed coldly, "No. Crazy woman." Colin laughed coldly and scolded. Faced with Colin's scolding, Cynthia actually laughed excitedly. Cynthia, who was immersed in a thrill of revenge, didn't notice that Colin's eyes were gradually becoming fierce and bloodthirsty. He completely ignored the longsword that pierced through his chest and rushed forward, grabbing Cynthia's neck. Then, he bit her. Chapter 70. Could teeth bite a person to death? If it was a lion, tiger or other beasts, perhaps it could. But if it was a human, then the threat would be greatly reduced. Especially if it was a human with a sword in his chest. Cynthia thought so too. So when she saw the struggling Colin biting her neck, she did not panic at all. She even felt disdain. As Colin's actions were rushed and sudden, it was completely out of Cynthia's expectations, so when she wanted to dodge, it was already too late. Since she could not dodge, then she would not dodge. Cynthia allowed Colin to bite her neck, while she frantically twisted the sword in Colin's chest, trying to crush his heart. However, no matter how she twisted the sword, Colin did not show any signs of exhaustion. Instead, he bit even harder. At this moment, Cynthia finally started to panic. And she realized that Colin was actually sucking her blood. This lunatic. But before Cynthia could try to break free from this crazy man, a tremor from the depths of her soul instantly made her lose consciousness. And Colin was still lying on Cynthia, who was gradually falling to the ground, sucking continuously. Ah, such a sweet taste. He could not extricate himself. Actually, when Cynthia lost consciousness, Colin already knew that the danger was over. But, he did not want to get up from her body. A primitive instinct from the depths of his blood made him unable to stop. Suck. Suck. Suck her dry. Previously, when Colin drank blood, although he enjoyed it quite a bit, but he did not have this kind of addictive feeling. But at that time, Colin drank the blood of the dead. Unlike now, he was completely gnawing on her raw. Could it be that this was the correct way to be a vampire in this world? The last bit of rationality in his mind told Colin that he must stop sucking immediately. Otherwise, Cynthia would really be sucked dry. Of course, he was not worried that this crazy woman would die. In fact, based on what this crazy woman did to him, Colin could totally kill her without any psychological barriers. However, he definitely wouldn't use such a method. Although Colin had guessed that he would become a creature similar to a vampire from the beginning of his transmigration, he did not wish to become an inhumane demon, a wild beast that was crazy for blood. Stop. Stop. Colin tried to leave Cynthia's neck with the last shred of rationality in his mind. However, he was horrified to discover that he couldn't break free at all. This wasn't just because of the feeling of addiction that he didn't want to break free. Objectively speaking, there was an inexplicable force that tightly bound him and Cynthia together, making it impossible for them to separate. What's going on? Colin began to panic. Large amounts of blood flowed into his mouth, causing his stomach to swell. On the other hand, Cynthia, who was on the ground, had turned extremely pale, and her body was visibly shriveling. Gulp. Gulp. In the dark and quiet room, there was only this eerie sound. Just when Colin thought that he was going to suck Cynthia dry, he suddenly realized that he could no longer suck any blood. Just when he finally heaved a sigh of relief and was about to get up, he suddenly realized that he was still unable to break free from Cynthia's body. What's going on? Just when Colin was bewildered, a strong suction force suddenly came from the wound on Cynthia's neck. This woman actually started to suck Colin's blood. This time, Colin was scared out of his wits. He frantically struggled, trying to break free from Cynthia. However, it was all in vain. It was as if a mysterious ritual was in progress, and there was no way to interrupt it. Colin was extremely regretful at this moment. Why did he have to bite this crazy woman for no reason? Now, he wouldn't be sucked dry by her, right? Also, what the hell was this world's vampire setting? Why was sucking blood so dangerous? Just as Colin was infuriated, Cynthia's shriveled body slowly became plump again. As for Colin's face, it was obvious to the naked eye that he was turning pale. At this moment, Cynthia was a veritable juicer concubine. What was worse was that what she was sucking was not the blood in Colin's stomach that originally belonged to her, but Colin's own blood. Colin had already given up on struggling. He realized that the two of them were in the middle of some kind of ritual, and this ritual, even he could not interrupt it. Not knowing how long had passed, just when Colin thought that he was about to become a dry corpse, the suction force in Cynthia's body finally disappeared. Colin quivered and quickly pulled out his teeth. Then he quickly moved away from Cynthia, afraid that he would be sucked again. Phew, phew, Colin gasped for air, a feeling of relief after surviving a disaster spontaneously arose. After this near-death experience, he immediately swore he would never eat raw again. Although when he first sucked Cynthia's blood, the addictive pleasure made him intoxicated. But later on, the feeling of being sucked back was like going through purgatory. Colin checked his body with lingering fear. Other than the harmless long sword in his chest, the only threat was that he had lost too much blood. In that inexplicable ritual just now, Cynthia had actually sucked away close to half of the blood in his body. The large amount of blood loss made Colin's already pale face even paler. At a glance, he did not look like a human at all. But what made Colin slightly relieved was that there was a lot of Cynthia's blood in his stomach. The amount seemed to be about the same as what Cynthia had sucked away. Could it be that this was actually a blood exchange ritual? If he had a choice, Colin would definitely not want to exchange blood with this crazy woman, Cynthia. If he knew that such an uncontrollable thing would happen, Colin would definitely pretend to be dead first, and then when the other party was not paying attention, he would counterattack. As long as Cynthia was dead, sucking her blood again should not cause such a situation. But it was too late to regret now. Colin had never thought that such an accident would happen to Ronald. Since it had already happened, Colin did not have any more meaningless regrets. He started to check his body to see if sucking the blood of a high-ranked knight had allowed him to successfully advance. But, he was quickly disappointed. This high-ranked female knight's blood did not give Colin any signs of advancing. No. Not only did he not advance, after Colin carefully checked again, he was shocked to find that he had actually regressed. He, who was originally a knight of the second rank, had actually regressed to the first rank. Colin was so angry that he almost vomited blood again. What kind of ritual was this? But, when Colin calmed down again, he found that there was an inexplicable mysterious connection between himself and Cynthia, who was still lying on the ground. It was as if he could control that crazy woman. So, he tried to wake up Cynthia, who he did not know if she was dead or alive. Get up. Get up. Then, the originally silent Cynthia suddenly opened her eyes. She quickly climbed up from the ground and knelt on one knee in front of Colin. There was no longer any hatred on her face, and in its place was complete obedience. She opened her red lips and said to Colin in an incomparably respectful tone, "Master." Chapter 71. Sir Viscounts. Are you all right? Knight Raymond's anxious voice came from outside the door. But before he could rush into the room, he heard Colin's voice, "Guard outside, don't come in." Raymond stopped in his tracks. But when he saw the corpses of the guards and the broken door, he worriedly asked again, "Sir Viscounts, are you really all right? Did an assassin break into your room?" "I'm fine. The assassin has been subdued by me. Guard outside the door, don't let anyone come near." "Yes." Raymond heaved a sigh of relief and concentrated on guarding outside. After sending Raymond away, Colin turned his attention back to Cynthia. Everything that happened just now was too strange, his mind was still in a mess. "What did you just call me?" "Master." "Who am I?" "You are my master." "No, I asked for my name." "Colin Angelo." "Your name?" "Cynthia Sudo." "Why are you here?" "I tried to assassinate you, master." Hearing this, Colin confirmed that this Cynthia still had her memories. But, why did it suddenly become like this? Why did you try to assassinate me? Because you are my brother's murderer. Then do you still want to kill me now? No. Why? Because Master's safety is more important than anything else. Colin blinked, as if he realized something. Legend says that vampires can create descendants that are infinitely loyal. Could it be that he just created a blood descendant by accident? Stand up. Kneel. Crawl. Colin issued a series of orders, and he was surprised to find that Cynthia followed all of them meticulously. Even the last extremely humiliating order, she did not hesitate at all. Looking at Cynthia crawling on the floor like a bitch, Colin's heart was filled with joy. Who asked you to always go against me? Who asked you to kill me? This is your end. Bark like a dog. Woof woof woof. Ha! Colin was overjoyed. However, in the process of laughing, he pulled on his wound, and a sharp pain caused him to be unable to laugh. Only then did he realize that he had not pulled out the sword from his chest. Come here and help me pull out the sword, Colin ordered Cynthia. Chi! Pulling out the sword, Colin let out another miserable howl. Lord Viscounts! Are you all right? Raymond, who was guarding the door, was alarmed by the scream and hurriedly asked. I'm fine, don't come in. Yes. Although Raymond was puzzled, he still stood guard outside the door out of loyalty and trust for Colin. Colin leaned against the wall for a while. Looking at Cynthia, he suddenly ordered, Come, stab me with your sword. This time Cynthia didn't move. Why aren't you stabbing? I can't hurt Master. This answer made Colin understand that his safety took precedence over his orders. Then stab yourself. Chi. Cynthia didn't hesitate to stab herself in the chest. Then she let out a groan. Pull it out. Cynthia pulled out the sword again. Colin carefully looked at her and found that other than the small amount of blood at the beginning, there was no major bleeding. It seemed that she also had the ability to control her own blood. Moreover, this kind of injury that would be fatal to a normal person didn't seem to affect Cynthia too much. In addition, her muffled groans and pained expression showed that she could feel pain. These characteristics were almost exactly the same as Colin's. Colin's interest was suddenly piqued. Previously, in order to understand the settings of this world's vampires, he thought of a few extreme experiments. However, he didn't dare to do it on his own body. He was afraid that he would accidentally kill himself if he wasn't careful. Now, he felt that he had found a perfect experimental subject. Beheading? Bleeding? Stuffing garlic? Leather whip dripping wax? Colin was thinking about which experiment to start with, but suddenly hesitated. After all, this was his first blood descendant, it would be a waste to play with her to death so quickly. Moreover, death might even be a form of release for this woman. So, Colin decided to play with her a bit more. When he's done, he'll send this crazy woman down to meet her brother. At this time, he suddenly realized another problem and asked, Will you tell anyone about what happened tonight? I won't. Why? The secret of the blood descendant's inheritance cannot be leaked. Colin was completely relieved. But, he was surprised to find that Cynthia actually knew the term, blood descendant. How much do you know about the blood descendant? The blood descendant is a race created by Master. What else? Cynthia shook her head, obviously she didn't know any more information. Colin was a bit disappointed. After thinking for a while, he asked, What level are you now? 3rd level. It didn't change. Colin was a bit confused, why was he the only one who dropped a level? Give me your blood. Colin ordered again. Cynthia didn't hesitate to use her sword to cut her wrist, and dripped the blood into a cup on the table. When the cup was almost full, Colin ordered again, Okay, give it to me. Cynthia then controlled the bleeding on her wrist, and passed the cup to Colin. Gulp, gulp, Colin drank it all in one gulp. After waiting for a while, there was no reaction. Give me another cup. Cynthia let the blood continue to flow into the cup, and gave it to Colin after it was full. After another cup, Colin found that there was still no reaction. Colin didn't give up, and let Cynthia fill another cup. After 3 cups, there was still no sign of advancement. Colin looked at the pale Cynthia, and swallowed the words, "One more cup," that was about to come out of his mouth. If she drank any more, she would probably die. But, what was going on? Wasn't the blood of a high-level knight supposed to help him advance? Why didn't it work? Could it be that the blood of a blood-kin had no effect on him? Colin thought for a moment, and then shouted towards the door, "Raymond, come in." "Yes, Sir Viscounts." Raymond quickly walked into the room, and first checked on Colin, and after seeing that he was fine, he stared at Cynthia with vigilance. The smell of blood in the room, and the bloody sword in Cynthia's hand, made this loyal knight's heart tighten. "Raymond, the castle's defense still needs to be strengthened. How could you let someone sneak in?" In fact, this matter couldn't be blamed on Raymond. After all, this castle originally belonged to the Su Duo family, and Cynthia knew this place like the back of her hand. Raymond, on the other hand, had just moved in here, and wasn't familiar with the environment. To prevent a third-step knight like Cynthia from sneaking in was really too difficult. "Yes. Sir Viscounts, you are right. This is my fault. Please punish me." Raymond didn't explain, and only knelt on one knee in front of Colin, willing to accept the punishment. "Yes, you should be punished." Colin actually nodded, and then ordered Cynthia, "Knock him out." Bang! Raymond didn't have time to react, and the scabbard in Cynthia's hand had already smashed into the back of his head. Colin looked at the fallen Raymond and hesitated for a moment. Then he ordered Cynthia, "Let's go. Bite him." Chapter 72. If someone were to barge into Colin's room, they would see a scene that would make their blood boil. A man and a woman were entangled on the ground, the woman's teeth were biting the man's neck, greedily sucking on it. Colin, on the other hand, was sitting on the side with his legs crossed, admiring this strange and bloody scene with great interest. At the same time, he also guessed that the accident that happened when he was eating Cynthia was probably some kind of inheritance ceremony of the blood breeds. Perhaps it should be called the embrace. And after Cynthia was embraced by him, she became his blood descendant. As a blood kin, she could not harm Colin. She also had to listen to Colin's orders unconditionally. She also could not reveal the secrets of the blood breeds to outsiders. These 3 iron rules that were engraved in Cynthia's mind made Colin feel completely at ease with her. The only thing that made Colin disappointed was that after becoming his blood kin, Cynthia's blood could no longer help him advance. Moreover, creating a blood kin seemed to require a drop in rank. This made Colin a little depressed. But at the same time, he also understood that this godly skill that could turn an enemy into a loyal servant, if there were no necessary costs and restrictions, then it would be too invincible. If that was the case, Colin would only need to bite anyone he saw, and it wouldn't be long before the whole world would become the blood breed's paradise. However, he still had to continue experimenting with what kind of setting the embrace was. Now, he was testing whether the blood kin could create another blood kin through the embrace. At this time, Cynthia and Raymond's embrace ceremony was nearing its end. "What rank are you now?" Seeing Cynthia let go of the wound, Colin quickly asked. "Second rank." This was a drop in rank. Colin nodded, then looked at Raymond. "Raymond?" Knight Raymond opened his eyes. After a short moment of confusion, he immediately woke up. "Master." Hearing Raymond call him master and not Lord Viscounts, Colin knew that the embrace was a success. He pointed at Cynthia and asked, "Then who is she?" "She is also my master." Colin frowned and continued to ask, if my orders conflict with hers, who will you listen to? I'll listen to you, Raymond said to Colin. Why? Because you are her master. Colin stroked his chin. He suddenly felt that this blood tribe inheritance was quite interesting. It was as though a blood race genealogy had been imprinted into their minds, allowing them to distinguish who was the true ruler. What's your level now? Colin asked again. 2nd rank. This was Raymond's original rank. Colin could basically confirm now that the vampire who performed the embrace would pay the price of losing 1 level of strength, while the vampire who received the embrace would maintain the same strength. Give me your blood. Colin passed over a cup and ordered Raymond. Yes. Without any hesitation, Raymond cut his arm open, and fresh blood flowed into the cup. All right, that's enough. Seeing that the blood was about to spill out of the cup and Raymond showed no signs of stopping, Colin hurriedly called for him to stop. He didn't want his own vampire to die from excessive blood loss. Drinking Raymond's blood in one gulp, Colin carefully felt the changes in his body. However, the surprise didn't happen. Other than replenishing stamina, Knight Raymond's blood couldn't help Colin level up. Colin completely gave up. It seemed that this shortcut wouldn't work. After understanding the price and limitations of the embrace, Colin knew that creating a vampire without limit wouldn't work. Taking out the parchment he kept, Colin prepared to record these new discoveries. But just as he was about to write, Colin realized a problem. The 2 vampires he developed were both knights. Then, could other professions be developed into vampires? What about non-professionals? Thinking of this, Colin immediately had Raymond make a trip to Icestone City's prison. Soon, Raymond came back with 2 death row prisoners. One was a rank 1 warrior, and the other was a normal person who didn't have any profession. When the 2 death row prisoners saw Colin, they thought that they were about to be executed and immediately begged for mercy. Colin felt that they were too noisy, so he had Cynthia knock them out one by one. Then, his gaze hesitated between Cynthia and Raymond, and finally chose Raymond. Raymond, go bite him. Colin pointed at the rank 1 warrior. Raymond didn't mind the stench of this guy who had just been fished out of prison and directly bit him. After a long time, Raymond had almost sucked the death row warrior dry, but the expected backlash still hadn't come. Colin rubbed his chin, feeling that the warrior profession probably couldn't become a vampire. Before, when he used the embrace on Cynthia, and when Cynthia used the embrace on Raymond, there was a backlash when they were halfway through sucking the blood. And now this, Colin didn't call for a stop, wondering if a miracle would happen. However, the miracle didn't happen. The death row soldier was directly sucked dry by Raymond, turning into a dried corpse. The embrace failed. Although he didn't have much hope, Colin still wanted to give it a try and let Raymond use the embrace on the non-professional death row prisoner. If even a warrior couldn't do it, then this guy who wasn't even a warrior probably couldn't become a vampire. Another round of sucking. Poor Raymond, because he had sucked too much blood, vomited a few times along the way, but still, he didn't succeed in using the embrace on the non-professional death row prisoner. Colin also couldn't find other professions for the time being, such as mages, warriors, rangers, etc., to do this experiment, so he could only give up. Currently, it seemed that only knights could receive the embrace and become a vampire. Colin wrote down this strange setting on the parchment, and couldn't help but feel puzzled. Why did it have to be a knight? Moreover, the blood of a high-level knight and the holy water of the church could help him advance. This was a very strange point. Could it be that the blood breeds of this world had some kind of relationship with the Church of Glory? Colin shook his head and temporarily put this thought aside. The current him didn't have the right to investigate the mystery behind this. When he was strong enough to drink pure holy water like it was water, maybe he could test the relationship between the God of Glory and the blood breeds. However, the most important thing now was to develop his own territory and build an army loyal to him. Originally, Colin wanted to use the embrace to obtain an army of absolute loyalty, but after discovering the harsh conditions of the embrace, he gave up. Vampires were destined to be precious and rare. Therefore, they had to be used in the most appropriate place. Thinking of this, Colin immediately ordered Cynthia, immediately head to Fallen Eagle City and pledge your loyalty to Earl Oman. Yes. Chapter 73. Lord Charles, are you all right? The maid saw Knight Charles, who was walking unsteadily and almost fell, and hurriedly went forward to help him. I'm not drunk, generally speaking, 70 to 80% of those who said this were really drunk. The maid was already used to Knight Charles's drunken state. She knew that Knight Charles would go to the tavern to drink almost every day and would not return until he was completely drunk. This retired officer of the Black Cavalry, after switching allegiance to Colin under the orders of Marquis Garcia, it was as if he had become a different person. The iron-blooded knight who had once galloped on the battlefield and killed trolls until they cried like ghosts and howled like wolves had completely disappeared. Only an alcoholic who could not hold a sword steadily and had nothing to do every day could only rely on alcohol to numb himself. The maid struggled to help the dizzy Knight Charles onto the bed and asked softly, "Sir, do you need some water?" Knight Charles did not respond. After the maid heard the other party's thunderous snoring, she shook her head helplessly. She could only carefully take off the other party's coat and shoes, cover him with a blanket, and then get up and leave. The door was gently closed. But after a while, it was opened again. Colin walked in. "Charles? Knight Charles?" Colin called out twice and even pushed Charles's arm. But there was no response. "Hey, Charles. I order you to get up immediately." Colin raised his voice and even pinched the other party's nose mischievously. Huff, huff, Charles's breathing was obstructed. After struggling for a while, he opened his mouth and gasped for breath. But he still did not wake up. Colin rolled his eyes. Colin originally had high hopes for this retired officer of the Black Cavalry. In his opinion, Knight Charles and the dozen or so retired soldiers of the Black Cavalry with him were excellent candidates for instructors. They were the cavalry seeds he had always dreamed of. However, it was a pity that not everyone could accept the cruel reality and stand up again after suffering a heavy blow. This was especially true for soldiers like Knight Charles, who valued glory as much as his life. His retirement from the Black Cavalry was a huge blow to him. It almost completely destroyed this tough guy. Originally, Colin was almost ready to give up on this guy. But now, he had a better idea. Colin slowly revealed his two sharp canine teeth and was about to bite down. But he still stopped. If he guessed correctly, the complete embrace ritual should be able to create conscious spawns. Then, how would he explain this to Knight Charles? Colin rubbed his chin. He felt that he couldn't forcefully convert her while she was asleep without her consent. In that case, he might not be able to get a loyal subordinate. Thus, Colin sat down on the chair in the room again, thinking about what to say later. When Knight Charles woke up again, it was already close to noon. "Shuei, someone come. Give me water." The moment Charles woke up, he yelled for the maids. Soon, a cup of water was handed in front of Charles. Charles took it and put it in his mouth. But from the corner of his eye, he saw the person standing in front of his bed. Not a maid. Pfft. Charles spat out all the water he had just drunk. Then he hurriedly got out of bed and bowed. "Sir Viscounts, why are you here?" Colin sat back on the chair and waved at Charles with a smile. "Don't be nervous, I'm just here to see you." Charles was embarrassed. "You can send someone to summon me, you don't have to come here personally. I sent someone, but they didn't seem to be able to wake you up, so I came here myself." Charles was even more embarrassed and apologized repeatedly. "I'm sorry, Sir Viscounts, I drank a little too much last night, only last night." Colin smiled. "Please rest assured, I will control my drinking in the future. This won't happen again." Hearing Charles's promise, Colin was not relieved. If Marquis Garcia stood in front of Charles and asked him to make such a promise, perhaps Charles would really carry it out meticulously. But if it was Colin himself, he felt that he did not have such prestige. So, Colin followed the plan he had thought of last night and asked, "Knight Charles, I can understand your pain, and I've found a way to help you return to the battlefield." "Really?" Charles suddenly raised his head, his eyes finally shining. But at the same time, a trace of disbelief flashed through his heart. In order to heal his injuries, Marquis Garcia had also approached the Church of Glory. But the answer he received was that only a priest above the level of a cardinal could perform the healing technique of limb regrowth. A cardinal. There were only 3 cardinals in the entire Church of Glory. How could such an important person be willing to waste his divine power to heal a small knight like him? So, Charles was in despair. But now, Colin had given him a glimmer of hope. "I can't guarantee success. Also, this method has a certain price." Colin's cautious attitude not only did not disappoint Charles, it made him trust Colin even more. "As long as I can hold my sword tightly again, I'm willing to pay any price." "Are you sure? This treatment method may make you lose your mind and turn you into a muddle-headed beast." Charles laughed bitterly. "Lord Viscounts, I'm now a muddle-headed beast. Leaving the battlefield, I'd rather die. Have you thought it through?" Charles knelt on one knee in front of Colin and nodded solemnly. "I've thought it through. As long as you can help me recover my fingers, I swear in the name of my ancestors to the God of Glory that I'll be at your disposal for the rest of my life." Although Charles had already sworn loyalty to Colin, he had done it under the orders of Marquis Garcia. But this time, he was willing to do it. Colin felt Charles's determination and handed him a mug. "There's a knockout drug in this water. The treatment ritual later requires you to be unconscious because the process will be painful." After hearing about the knockout drug, Charles still took the mug and drank it in one gulp. He did not even listen to Colin's explanation. Colin raised his eyebrows. He was moved by Charles's determination and trust. After a while, Charles fell asleep under the influence of the knockout drug. Colin walked over, revealed his sharp canine teeth, and bit Charles's neck. Sure enough, just like when he first embraced Cynthia, after Colin sucked for a while, he noticed a suction force coming from Charles's wound. This time, Colin did not run away. He suppressed the panic in his heart and allowed his blood to flow into Charles's body through his canine teeth. Slowly, wisps of blood-red smoke floated out of the 2 of them. The smoke was like a living creature, drawing regular curves on the ground. It was like a magic circle. There were more and more curves, more and more complicated, more and more mysterious. In a trance, low murmurs that sounded like sleep talk echoed in Colin's ears. The voice grew louder and louder, as if it was announcing something. "The condensation of blood is my spirit. Lord of blood, immortal and indestructible. With my blood, I bestow thee my inheritance." Chapter 74. Knock knock knock. "Come in." Raymond walked into the room and bowed. "Sir Viscounts, Steward Aemon and the Knight of Rigo have successfully arrived at Ice Stone City." "Yes, I understand." Colin had just completed the embrace on Knight Charles and his face was a bit pale. "Let them settle down and meet me in the study." "Yes." After Raymond left, Colin looked at the still unconscious Charles and tried to order, "Get up, Charles, get up." However, Charles didn't respond. Colin frowned. He wasn't sure if the embrace ceremony was considered a success. Furthermore, he was shocked to discover that his cultivation level had actually decreased. Colin was originally a rank 2 knight, but after this embrace ceremony, he actually dropped to rank 1. He just didn't know if this drop in rank was temporary or permanent. However, he was still somewhat mentally prepared for this. A complete embrace ceremony probably wouldn't come without a price. Colin was already very surprised that he could create blood thralls without paying a price. If it wasn't for the fact that blood thralls couldn't continue to create the next generation of blood thralls, he would have been very surprised. If the blood thralls couldn't produce new blood thralls, Colin estimated that he could even create a vampire version of Resident Evil in this other world. Originally, he wanted to wait for Knight Charles to wake up before doing further experiments, but considering that Steward Aemon and the Knight of Rigo were still waiting for him, he didn't delay any longer and got up to leave Charles's room. "When Knight Charles wakes up, have him meet me in the study." Colin ordered the maid guarding the door. "Yes." Arriving at the study, Colin had just taken a sip of water when he saw Raymond walk in. Behind him was the Angeli family's old steward, Aemon, and the family's knight, Rigo Morben. "Master. Sir Viscounts. You're finally here. Come, sit. You've had a hard journey, what would you like to drink?" "Coffee will be fine." The Knight of Rigo rubbed his big bald head and hesitated for a moment before following behind Aemon and saying, "Same for me." Colin glanced at Leg with a smile. He had noticed Leg's hesitation just now, so he ordered the attendant at the door. "Go prepare 2 cups of coffee and a glass of ale." "Yes." Then, Colin turned to look at Leg. "If you want a drink, just say it. We haven't seen each other in a while. Why are you being so courteous with me?" Thank you, Lord Viscounts." Leg grinned, his ugly face smiling like a chrysanthemum. Leg was Raymond's elder brother. These 2 brothers of the Morben family became wandering knights when their family declined. They later pledged their loyalty to Baron Angeli and had a good relationship with Colin. Especially Leg, this tall and strong man was very talented in martial arts. When Baron Angeli was not at home, he was the one who acted as Colin's martial arts teacher. Therefore, when Colin saw this old acquaintance, although he was no longer the youth from before, he still instinctively felt a sense of familiarity. The 3 people in the study, Aemon, Leg, and Raymond, could be said to be the core of the Angeli family. As for the members of the side branches of the Angeli family, they were not outstanding people. Colin would only provide them with good food and drink and give them some simple things to do, but he would not rely on them too much. Perhaps when Knight Charles woke up, he could also join this core circle. The attendant quickly brought in coffee and ale. Colin exchanged a few pleasantries with everyone, then got to the main topic. "Aemon, I need you to immediately take over the daily affairs of the territory. Also, find a few candidates for clerks and tax officers. Make a list and give it to me. I will finalize and assign them to each town." "Yes." Although the family territory has expanded a lot this time, the family's financial situation will probably go through a difficult period. Also, Ice Stone City has just been ransacked by the trolls and needs to rest. I don't want to raise taxes at this time. Therefore, other than the daily necessities, do not do anything extravagant. Everything will be simple. "Yes, Master. You are truly a wise and benevolent lord," Butler Aemon said in a gratified tone. However, the old butler thought for a moment and still asked, "However, Master, do you want to renovate the castle you are currently living in? After all, the things here were left behind by the Su Duo family." "No need, I don't care about these things." Colin waved his hand. Aemon then suggested, "Do you want to change the color of the castle's outer walls? This way, it won't cost much, but it will also give off a new atmosphere." Colin thought for a moment and felt that this idea was not bad. Changing the skin of the castle would not cost much, but it would let the citizens know that there was a new master here. "All right. Then let's change it to red. Is this dye easy to get?" Colin felt that as a member of the blood breed, red was his lucky color. "Red." The old butler thought for a moment and nodded, "It's convenient. The coastal areas of the Empire's southern border produce a dye made from coral. It can be used to dye the castle's outer walls red. The price is not expensive either." "Very good, then let's do that." "Yes, Master." The old butler nodded and then asked, "Do we need to change the castle's name?" Name? Colin rubbed his chin. He suddenly realized that he had never paid attention to the name of the Su Duo family's castle. However, this was no longer important. "Let's call it Red Castle." The genius at naming Colin immediately made a decision. The corner of Eamon's mouth twitched. He was speechless at this name. The old butler was already resentful that the Angeli family's original Grey Castle was called Grey Castle. He did not expect that there would be another Red Castle now, thinking about the names of other castles, Frostmoon Castle, White Dew Castle, Fontaine Castle, only this could reflect the self-restraint that an elegant noble should have. "Don't you need to think about it again?" Eamon carefully suggested. Is the name Red Castle not nice?" Colin blinked and looked at the Mobin brothers. The knight Raymond immediately nodded. This knight had always been obedient to Colin. The knight of Rigo also nodded frantically. "I think this name is very good." Eamon glanced at him and found that this silly fellow's expression did not seem to be fake. It seemed that he really liked this name. "For the family's style, I must first make the Viscount stay as far away from these two ignorant and incompetent fellows as possible," the old butler secretly thought to himself. "Okay, then it's settled." Colin immediately decided on the castle's name. He really could not think of a better name. Eamon secretly sighed. He suddenly realized that there was still a long way to go to improve the Angeli family's style. "Oh, that's right. Why don't we change the family crest too?" Colin suddenly suggested. Colin did not like the roaring white bear emblem of the Angeli family very much. In his heart, he had some ideas about the new emblem. Butler Eamon reminded him, "Master, changing the family emblem requires the approval of the Empire's Senate." "Okay, then let's go through the process." Colin casually replied. "But, to go through the process of the Senate, cough cough, master, you know," Colin was stunned. Only then did he realize what Eamon meant. They actually wanted to bribe him. Going through the memories of his predecessor, Colin indeed found that the Empire's Senate was really like that. Without money, there was basically nothing that could be done. Especially for a small family like the Angeli family. If they did not bleed once, the elders of the Senate would not even look at them. Then forget it, let's talk about it later. Colin would not give money now. He had a lot of money now. An army. The most important thing now was to raise money to build an army. Chapter 75. Rigo, how many people are left in the family's army? Including the soldiers Raymond brought to Ice Stone City, there are about 600 people in the family's army. 600. Colin rubbed his head, feeling a bit depressed. Actually, this was all his dead father's fault, who had buried most of the family's army on the front lines. Now, the Angeli family only had this little bit left. We need to expand the army. Colin clenched his teeth. He was very clear that in this dangerous alternate world, only the army was his foundation. If he could have an army as terrifying as the Black Cavalry, then whoever the master of the northern frontier would have to ask for Colin's opinion. Therefore, Colin left the daily affairs of the Lord to Eamon, while he focused most of his energy on the construction of the army. "Yes, Lord Viscounts. How many soldiers do you need?" Colin took a sip from his mug. The coffee inside was already cold, and the bitter taste cleared his mind. "First, replenish the regular army with 1,000 men, then form a reserve force of 1,000 men. I'll give you a month's time, is that enough?" "Yes." The two brothers thumped their chests loudly. Colin nodded, believing that the two brothers should be able to complete this task well. However, the soldiers Colin and Raymond recruited and trained were all infantry, while the cavalry that Colin truly desired would have to be found elsewhere. "Raymond, go see if Knight Charles is awake. If he is, tell him to come see me immediately." "Yes." Raymond left, and Colin sat behind the desk again. He waved at Eamon and began to hand over the mountainous pile of official documents. There were a lot of things to do in the territory. Fortunately, Eamon came, otherwise Colin would have to deal with them for a while. The Knight of Rigo sat on the side in a daze. However, he was originally someone who couldn't sit still. After drinking all the ale, he began to scratch his head and look around. Colin didn't have time to pay attention to him at this time. Not long after, Legg took the initiative to speak. "Lord Viscounts, I have a small request, speak." Colin did not even raise his head. Legg touched his bald head with an embarrassed expression on his face. "I heard that your new fief includes a place called Ice Lake Town, right?" "Yes. The previous lord there was Baron Billy, but this idiot participated in the Lord's rebellion and was executed by the Duke. The Duke has also bestowed the territory to me." Yes, it's there." Legg rubbed his hands and said hesitantly, "Do you know that it used to be the fief of the Mauben family?" Hearing this, Colin put down the document in his hand and raised his head to look at Legg, his eyes carrying a trace of scrutiny. "Why do I remember that the fief of the Mauben family was Cotton Town?" Yes, you didn't remember wrongly. Cotton Flower Town was indeed our family's fief. However, before becoming the Lord of Cotton Flower Town, our family's fief was actually in Ice Lake Town. That was a long time ago, even Baron Angeli doesn't know about it. The real place where the Mauben family rose was actually Ice Lake Town. The scrutinizing look in Colin's eyes disappeared, and he said with a smile, "I see, it seems that your family has really experienced many ups and downs." Just now, Colin almost thought that Legg was lying. If Legg did not explain it clearly later, Colin was afraid that he would really re-evaluate the loyalty of this seemingly honest knight. Yes. Legg could not help but touch his big bald head again. Colin could not help but wonder if this guy's hair was being rubbed by him like this. Colin now understood Legg's meaning. This guy probably wanted him to keep Ice Lake Town for the Mauben family, and reward them after they made a contribution. However, Colin suddenly wanted to tease this silly big guy. "Do you want to go back and have a look?" Legg was stunned, then quickly nodded, yes. "I do want to go back and have a look. After all, it's been so many years, I don't know how it's developing now." "Of course you can go, I'll give you a few days off. But when you go, you have to greet the Lord there and pay attention to etiquette." Lord. Legg was dumbfounded. Have you already conferred Ice Lake Town to someone else?" Colin held his chin and looked at Legg's dumbfounded look, feeling quite amused. "Yes, I've already decided on a good candidate, but it hasn't been officially conferred yet." Legg was so anxious that his face turned red. Then who did you confer Ice Lake Town to?" Colin leaned against the back of the chair with a smile, and felt that he had played enough with this silly big guy, so he told the truth, "Raymond Mauben." Raymond. Legg realized that Colin was teasing him, and he immediately felt relieved. He stepped forward, knelt on one knee, and said solemnly, "Thank you for your kindness to the Mauben family, my brother and I will always remember it in our hearts." "What? You don't blame me for giving the title to your brother and not you?" "Of course not. I already know of the contributions my brother has made along the way with you. He deserves to be rewarded." "That's good. When you two help me train the first batch of troops, I will confer Raymond the title of Baron of Ice Lake Town, and let you go back with him to take a look." "Thank you, sir." In fact, Colin had already planned to confer Raymond the title of Baron. After all, Raymond had been on the run with him, and had indeed worked hard and contributed a lot. Moreover, he was loyal and devoted. If he were to confer the title of Baron now, it would definitely be Raymond. However, Raymond's fief was something Colin had decided on the spot after hearing Legg's story and learning that Ice Lake Town was the old fief of the Mauben family. Knock. "Come in." The door opened again, and Raymond led Charles in. "Sir Viscounts." Knight Charles bowed respectfully to Colin, as if there was no difference from before. However, Colin still felt that there seemed to be some kind of indistinct connection between the two, as if it was a kind of bloodline resonance. Moreover, although Knight Charles's rank was higher than Colin's, Colin felt that he could completely suppress the other party. This was not a suppression of strength, but a suppression of bloodline. Colin felt that Knight Charles, a clan member created through the embrace ceremony, could not be called a blood thrall. It would be more appropriate to call him a blood descendant. Raymond, you two are dismissed. The recruitment and training of the troops will begin immediately. Yes, Sir Viscounts. The two brothers bowed and left. Aemon, you should leave as well. You take care of the daily affairs of the territory, and discuss with me if there's anything you can't decide on. Yes, sir. After Aemon left, the study suddenly quieted down. Colin looked at Knight Charles, hesitating on how to greet his first blood descendant. However, Knight Charles had already knelt on one knee, his left hand clasped in front of his chest, and said with a sincere expression, Sir God's chosen one, thank you for the grace you have bestowed upon me. Chapter 76. Colin was confused. What did you just call me? God's chosen one. Colin blinked and seemed to understand something. Then, he quickly sat up straight and pretended to be shocked. You actually saw through my identity. After taking a deep breath, Colin asked in a serious tone, You're right. Knight Charles, how did you recognize me as a God's chosen one? Charles raised his right hand and showed the section of his thumb to Colin. Sir, I can already feel the Lord's divine power repairing my body. To be able to cast such a divine spell and not be a priest, you must be a God's chosen one. Moreover, although I was unconscious during the healing ceremony, I still felt a trace of divine aura. That must be the aura of the God of Light. Even now, I can feel an irresistible power from you. You must be an apostle of an angel. You must be a God's chosen one. There were indeed God's chosen ones in this world. At least, that was what the Church of Light promoted. The most famous God's chosen one was, of course, the founding emperor of the Empire of Light, Garner San Lorenzo. The Church of Light recognized this legendary paladin as the angel of strength under the God of Light, Michael's apostle. And now, Colin suddenly realized that this God's chosen one setting was very suitable to fool his own blood descendants. Blood descendants created through a complete embrace ceremony obviously had their own consciousness. Although bloodline suppression could force the blood descendants to obey him, this method of control had hidden dangers. After all, loyalty under the threat of violence could not stand the test. Therefore, Colin had to use a clever method to control the other party. Then, what could be more suitable than religion to brainwash people? Knight Charles, you guessed right. I am indeed a God's chosen one. Sir, which archangel's apostle are you? After receiving Colin's confirmation, Knight Charles trembled with excitement. Colin leaned forward slightly and said seriously, Blood Angel, Dracula. Blood Angel? Knight Charles was puzzled. Please forgive my ignorance, but I don't think I've heard of this archangel's name. You must have heard it before. Of course you haven't. Colin did not panic at all. With a mysterious look, he said, This blood angel is a secret servant of the God of Light hidden in the darkness. He's responsible for carrying out secret missions. Of course, we can't let his name spread to the world. I understand. Now that you know who I am, to ensure the success of this secret mission, you must promise that you will never tell anyone about my real identity and what happened today. Not even His Holiness the Pope. Yes, my lord. I will never divulge any information about you. Colin looked at the fanatical Knight Charles and nodded with satisfaction. The deception was a success. In order to heal your severed finger, I instilled the Blood Angel's divine power into your body. Therefore, in the following period of time, your body may undergo some changes. But don't panic and don't make it public. Just record these changes and tell me. Understood? Yes, milord, I understand. Knight Charles nodded without the slightest doubt. Then, Colin picked up a cup of water and handed it to Knight Charles. The grace of God requires a price. You've heard of this before, haven't you? Of course. Yes, the price for the grace of the blood angel this time is your loyalty and a cup of fresh blood. All right. Knight Charles cut his wrist without hesitation and let the blood flow into the cup. You're level 3 now, right? Colin asked again. Yes, milord. There was no drop in level. Colin was a little depressed. He was still level 1. It seemed that the price of the embrace was not temporary. However, he was not too worried. Now that he had Knight Charles's blood, he should be able to recover quickly and even advance to level 3. For Colin to become a level 3 knight at such a young age, he could definitely be considered to have amazing talent. What? You said he cheated with the blood breed's characteristics? But the blood breed's characteristics were Colin's talent. After Knight Charles filled the cup, Colin asked him to stop. Milord, I think I can control my blood flow. Knight Charles looked at Colin in surprise. Colin waved his hand casually and said calmly, I said that your body will undergo some changes. These are all the grace of the blood angel. Praise the blood angel. Knight Charles did not doubt him and prayed with a sincere expression. All right, back to business. Colin put the cup of blood aside. I need you to help me train a cavalry. Of course, you have to control your alcohol consumption first. It's okay to drink a little occasionally, but don't let me see you drunk again. Yes. Milord. I'll stop drinking immediately. Knight Charles agreed without hesitation. At this moment, he swept away his previous decadent attitude and was full of energy. Although he did not know what Colin's mysterious mission was, this did not stop Knight Charles from being determined to help this blood angel apostle. He would not hesitate even if his body was crushed. How many people are you planning to recruit for the first batch of cavalry, Sir Viscounts? How many people do you think are suitable? Colin was not sure either. I don't think there should be too many in the first batch. Around 100 people would be the most suitable. All right, 100 then. I'll give you priority in recruiting soldiers. If you're interested in the active soldiers of the family army, you can also apply to transfer them to me. Yes. What else do you need? Colin did not hold back his support for the cavalry. Charles thought for a moment and said in a low voice, Milord, to build a cavalry, there are 3 important requirements: soldiers, war horses, and armor. I believe that with your support, there shouldn't be a problem with the first one. But for the last 2, if you want a truly powerful cavalry, you can't be careless. Colin touched his chin and agreed with Charles's words. If he only wanted a normal cavalry, then normal horses would be enough. As for armor, he could just give them bows and sabers. Why would he need armor? But this was not what he wanted. What he wanted was a powerful cavalry that could match the Black Cavalry. The Black Cavalry's war horses were the best horses in the northern frontier. As for armor, not to mention the heavy armor that the heavy cavalry wore, even the light cavalry had chainmail, half-body armor, and leather armor according to the soldier's rank. This was the guarantee of the Black Cavalry's battle power. If I go to Marquis Garcia, do you think he will help me? If it was before the conferring ceremony, Colin was confident that Marquis Garcia would definitely help him. But now, Knight Charles shook his head, Milord, I suggest you find someone else. Who? Marquis Dawson. Chapter 77. The study was very quiet. Only the sound of writing could be heard. It was Colin writing a letter to Marquis Dawson. After being reminded by Knight Charles, Colin immediately realized that if he needed war horses and armor, rather than Marquis Garcia, he might as well look for Marquis Dawson. This dwarf Marquis was actually the head butler of the Black Cavalry, or at least he used to be. Colin did not know if Marquis Dawson was willing to help him, but he had to try. After writing a sincere letter, Colin dripped wax on the seal of the letter, stamped it with the Angeli family badge, and handed it to Charles. "Send your men to deliver this letter to Ironforge." "Yes, sir." After night Charles left, Colin couldn't wait to pick up the cup and drink the blood in one gulp. Then, he waited patiently. However, after waiting for half a day, he still did not feel the familiar warmth. What was going on? Could it be that the blood of a blood descendant was the same as a blood slave, and could not help him advance? Colin was a little depressed. But then, he remembered that he still had 2 high-ranking knights who weren't from the blood clan under his command. Moreover, he was a third-step knight. As long as he could get his blood. Colin paced back and forth in the study, thinking of how to borrow some blood from this big idiot. Soon, he had an idea. Opening the door, Colin called the guard at the door and ordered, "Go inform the Knight of Rigo to accompany me to hunt in the suburbs tomorrow morning." "Yes, sir." After giving the order, Colin returned to the study. For a moment, he did not know what to do. After all, the task had been assigned, and he only needed to take care of the overall situation. Being a leader was great. Colin leaned on the back of the chair, crossed his legs, and looked around the study. Finally, his gaze fell on the judgment blade, hanging on the wall. Since he had nothing to do, Colin stepped forward and took the sword that the Duke had bestowed upon him. He examined it carefully. This was a typical knight's sword. The sword was about 80 centimeters long, and it was completely black. The sword was covered with flame-like patterns, which were engraved with an arcane spell that had a burning effect. The blade was sharp and triangular. Under the sunlight, it emitted a chilling white light. The handle could only be held with one hand, and there was a large ball. It was believed that it could be used in a horse battle. Looking at this knight's sword, Colin suddenly remembered what Marquis Garcia said to him after the Marquis ceremony. At that time, Colin had just been conferred the title of Viscounts by the Duke St. Hilda, and he was given the Judgment Blade. At that time, Colin swore an unconditional loyalty oath to the Duke in a fit of anger. This obviously irritated Marquis Garcia, who had just been betrayed by his brother. Now that he thought about it, Colin suddenly felt that the reason the Duke St. Hilda treated him so well was probably to sow discord between him and Marquis Garcia. Of course, there was no point in regretting it now. Colin was now thinking about the last words Marquis Garcia said to him. "Go back and understand the origin of the Judgment Blade in your hands. Reconsider what true loyalty is." The origin of the Judgment Blade? Colin's interest was suddenly piqued. Sheathing the sword, Colin immediately left the study. He remembered that there was a special library in this castle. After the trolls attacked this place, they looted all the wealth of the Su Duo family, but they did not touch the books in the library. Obviously, books were not attractive to the trolls. Sir Viscounts. After arriving at the library, an old man with white hair and a white beard immediately stood up and bowed. "You are the caretaker here?" "Yes, you can call me Quincy. Is there anything I can help you with?" Colin waved the knight's sword in his hand and asked, "Do you have any books about the origin of famous swords?" "The Judgment Blade?" "Oh. You actually recognize this sword?" Colin was a little surprised. Quincy nodded and explained, "Yes, I was fortunate enough to see this sword in Winter City. At that time, it was still the sword of the Duke St. Hilda." Colin narrowed his eyes. To recognize the sword of the Duke St. Hilda, one would definitely not be able to squeeze into a crowd and watch from afar. One would have to be very close to it. Colin did not believe that a mere caretaker of the library in the Viscount's castle would be able to get so close to the Duke St. Hilda. "Have you always been a caretaker here?" "No, I used to be the tax officer of Ice Stone City." Only then did Colin feel relieved. In this world, the most important task for nobles to govern their territories was to collect taxes. To be able to become the tax officer of Ice Stone City, Quincy could already be considered a core retainer of the Su Duo family. Of course, this was before he was transferred here to be the caretaker of the library. Then why were you transferred here? Because I offended the Viscounts of Su Duo. How did you offend him? Quincy hesitated for a moment, but still spoke the truth. I once suggested to the Viscounts of Su Duo to reduce the business tax of Ice Stone City. The Viscounts of Su Duo was furious, so he stripped me of my position and transferred me here. Reduce the business tax. Colin was suddenly interested. The nobles wanted nothing more than to increase the tax every day, but this former tax officer of Ice Stone City actually wanted to reduce the tax. No wonder he was fired by the Viscounts of Su Duo. However, Colin felt that he might have found a treasure. Then tell me, why do you want to reduce the business tax? A glimmer of hope flashed through Quincy's eyes, and he said somewhat anxiously. Sir Viscounts, if you have seen the tax documents of Ice Stone City in the past, you will understand that in this city, the agricultural tax is not the biggest source of income, but the business tax. Ice Stone City is located at the northeast corner of the northern frontier, so a large number of caravans traveling between the northern frontier and Sky Ice Plains will pass through here. This is the main reason why Ice Stone City is so prosperous. However, Ice Stone City is not without competitors. There are still 2 or 3 cities on the northern frontier that have the qualifications to compete with us. Therefore, if you want more merchants to pass through here, then you must give them more benefits. In other words, reduce the business tax. Colin smiled and asked in return, but this way, won't my tax revenue also be reduced? No. Although the tax rate is reduced, the base of the tax revenue will increase. The total amount of tax revenue won't necessarily decrease. I have calculated before, as long as you do it properly, you don't have to worry about your tax revenue decreasing at all. Moreover, more caravans will also mean that the hotels in Ice Stone City will be full, the taverns will be bustling day and night, and food, clothing, medicine, and so on will be in short supply. The local merchants will make a lot of money from these passing caravans, and the entire city will become more prosperous because of this. Please believe me, there is not much potential left for the agricultural tax to be excavated. However, the business tax is very promising. If I were to do it, I am confident that I can double Ice Stone City's business tax revenue within 3 years. Within 10 years, this city will become the most dazzling jewel of the northern frontier. Colin looked at the flushed Quincy and didn't say anything else. Quincy also gradually calmed down from his excitement. Colin's silence made him think that he had failed again. However, he was already used to it. Asking the nobles to reduce their taxes was even more unbearable than killing them. My apologies, Sir Viscounts. Let me take you to find the books. Just as Quincy was about to give up, Colin's voice suddenly rang out, all right, I will give you this chance. Chapter 78. Colin's words caused Quincy to freeze on the spot. After a while, he came back to his senses and asked in disbelief, Sir Viscounts, why you mean, that's right, I'm giving you this chance to return to the position of tax official in Ice Stone City. Thank you so much. Your kindness and wisdom are as dazzling as the sun, as bright as the ocean. Don't be in such a hurry to thank me, Colin waved his hand and interrupted the overly excited Quincy, if you mess it up, then I'll guard the library for you for the rest of my life. Quincy said loudly. Colin rolled his eyes. He didn't expect this old man to be so crafty. At his age, who knew how many more years he had left to live? If he messed it up and came back to guard the library, it wouldn't be a loss no matter how he looked at it. Instead, it would seem like Colin was taking care of him in his old age. No, it's not just you. If you mess it up, your son, oh right, you have a son, right? Colin saw Quincy nod before continuing, your son will also come and guard the library for the rest of his life. Quincy's expression finally changed. What? Scared? Could it be that all your bold words from before were just boasting? Colin saw this and began to provoke him. Of course not. Good, then you choose. Either you continue to guard the library for me, or you take this chance I'm giving you and take a gamble. Quincy's chest rose and fell violently. After a while, he clenched his teeth and said fiercely, Sir Viscounts, if I can really make Ice Stone City the most dazzling city on the northern frontier within 10 years, can you agree to a request of mine? Tell me. I hope you can bestow me with a surname. Colin's eyebrows twitched. In the Radiant Empire, only nobles were allowed to have surnames. Of course, Quincy didn't make this request to have Colin bestow him with a title. Because, this was not allowed. According to this world's noble laws, commoners were not allowed to be granted titles. Because they didn't have noble bloodlines, they didn't deserve it. However, it wasn't true that commoners couldn't change their social class. And the only way to make this leap was to marry a noble's daughter. As long as this noble's daughter gave birth to a descendant, then this descendant of a commoner and a noble would have a noble bloodline. Although it wouldn't be so pure, it would still be able to enter the eyes of the nobles. Thus, he would have the qualifications to accept the title of nobility. After being granted a title, the descendant could ask the lord to give him a surname. This surname could be shared with his father, grandfather, and great-grandfather. This was truly bringing honor to their ancestors. And that was what Quincy's current request meant, to ask Colin to help him. He probably wouldn't be able to marry her. It should be to help Quincy's son marry a noble's daughter, so that their family could achieve a social transition. Okay. Colin nodded. Not only did he not think that a commoner like Quincy, who had not made any contributions yet, was being tactless, he felt that it was a manifestation of self-confidence. One's ability was generally proportional to one's temper. Compared to a mediocre person with a good temper, he preferred a capable person who had a temper and personality and dared to make requests. If this former tax collector could really make Ice Stone City the wealthiest city on the northern frontier, then Colin felt that this person had the qualifications to enter the ranks of nobles. Seeing that Colin had agreed to his request, Quincy first showed an expression of disbelief, then ecstasy. In the end, he decisively knelt in front of Colin and swore his loyalty. Colin used Judgment Blade to tap Quincy's shoulder, accepting his loyalty. Okay, the tax collector's matter is settled. Now, you should help me look for any records related to this sword. Of course, of course. Please wait a moment. Quincy still hadn't recovered from his excitement, his body trembling non-stop. For a commoner, there was nothing more glorious than entering the ranks of nobles. Even if there was no sign of it yet, Quincy seemed to have seen his family's bright future. Colin didn't have to wait long before Quincy walked out, trembling as he held a thick tome in his hands. After flipping through it for a while, Quincy said respectfully, Sir Viscounts, the records related to Judgment Blade are all here. Colin nodded and sat down to carefully flip through the book. In reality, there was no such thing as a divine weapon in this world. It was impossible to dominate the world with just a blade or a sword. Perhaps the gods had such things in their hands, but they had never entered the mortal realm. Judgment Blade was just a well-made knight's sword, forged by a famous dwarf blacksmith. It was sharp and tough, but it wasn't invincible. The arcane array carved on it would indeed greatly increase its value, but that was it. It was obviously impossible to rely on this sword to challenge those of a higher rank and kill everyone. If it really had such power, the Duke of St. Hilda wouldn't have casually given it to Colin. What truly made this sword famous was still to see who wielded it and what great things it had done. According to the records, this sword was originally the sword of Duke St. Theon. The most amazing thing that Duke St. Theon had done in his life was to kill the Emperor of the Radiant Empire with his own hands. And the weapon he used at that time was the Judgment Blade. This matter had a great impact at the time, almost causing the Radiant Empire to fall apart. After the Kingslayer, Duke St. Theon killed the Emperor, he became the target of public criticism and was spurned by all humans. The entire human empire was in a state of panic, and the lords all raised their troops, preparing to suppress this Kingslayer. But then something happened that changed this Kingslayer into a judge. Not long after the Kingslayer incident, the Pope of the Radiant Church declared Duke Saint Theon innocent in front of everyone and announced an oracle: those who have darkness in their hearts will be judged. Thinking back to the situation at the time, this oracle clearly said that the emperor had darkness in his heart, and Duke Saint Theon was judging him. This oracle had saved Duke Saint Theon. Even the Radiant God had given an oracle, so naturally, no one dared to continue condemning Duke Saint Theon. All the curses immediately shifted to the emperor who had been killed. Because of the words, "those who have darkness in their hearts," in the oracle, the poor emperor was called the Dark Emperor. The public opinion changed instantly, and the Dark Emperor became the most foolish and evil monarch in the history of the empire, while the judge, Duke Saint Theon, became the hero of the empire, and the limelight was unparalleled. So, the knight's sword he used to kill the Dark Emperor was called the Judgment Blade. After Colin finished reading this part of history, he had even more doubts in his heart. Why did Marquis Garcia want him to know these things? Was he hinting something to Colin? The former Duke Saint Theon used this sword to kill his own monarch. Could it be that Marquis Garcia also wanted Colin to use it to kill his own monarch, the Duke Saint Hilda? It can't be that straightforward. Colin suddenly remembered that when Marquis Garcia asked him to understand the history of this sword, he was discussing the topic of loyalty. So, the message that Marquis Garcia wanted to convey should have something to do with loyalty. What was loyalty? Was Duke Saint Theon's king-killing considered loyalty? If it was betrayal, then why was he pardoned by the Radiant God? Colin thought for a while, then suddenly asked Quincy, who was beside him. "Go and find the detailed records of the Dark Emperor's life for me to see." Dark Emperor? Quincy thought for a while, then shook his head. "I'm sorry, Lord Viscounts, there are no records of this emperor's life here." "No." Colin looked up in surprise. The confusion in his heart deepened. How could there be no records? Chapter 79. The Dark Emperor did not leave behind any records. This was a very strange thing. As the former ruler of the Empire of Light, he should have been recorded in history. Moreover, this emperor was so special. He was killed by his own vassal and even attracted the oracle of the God of Light. This kind of person should have left a strong mark in history. Even if he was notorious, he should have left something behind. So, what evil things did the Dark Emperor do that he did not leave behind any records? Colin suddenly asked. Quincy shook his head and lowered his voice, as if he was afraid of something. "Lord Viscounts, the truth about that part of history has always been shrouded in a fog. What did the Dark Emperor do? Why did the Duke of Saint Theon kill him? Why did this matter attract the oracle? These things are not recorded in detail. In all the history books I have seen, the descriptions of these two people are very simple and vague, as if deliberately hiding something." Colin nodded in agreement. He felt that there were too many suspicious points in this part of history. Then, why did Marquis Garcia suggest that he understand this part of history? After thinking for a while, Colin suddenly asked, "Right, the history of the House of Saint Theon should be here, right?" "Yes." Quincy ran to the bookshelf and took out a book. "Lord Viscounts, please take a look." Colin flipped through it again. Actually, Colin had some understanding of the House of Saint Theon. After all, this was a paladin family, definitely a great noble. Other than the imperial family, there were only 6 such families in the entire human empire. Of course, only 4 of the 6 paladin families could be passed down to the present day. The other 2 disappeared. The House of Saint Theon was one of them. Thinking about it carefully, this was actually a very unreasonable thing. Because according to the unspoken rules of the nobles in this world, it was very rare for a family to be destroyed. Just like when the Duke of St. Hilda executed the rebellious lords, he also spared their families. Therefore, these families only lost their titles and territories, but the family did not disappear because of this. They were still considered nobles. No matter how destitute they were, they still had surnames and were fundamentally different from commoners. Once they achieved enough military merits, they could immediately receive rewards and rise again. Therefore, very few noble surnames were lost. Especially for a noble surname like Saint Theon, which had the word St in it, it was strange that it disappeared in the long river of history. After skimming through the history of the Saint Theon family, Colin was still puzzled. According to the book, the fief of the house of Saint Theon was in the east of the empire. However, at that time, the eastern region of the empire was not as monolithic as it was now. Instead, it was divided into two territories, one in the south and one in the north. The southern part of the eastern region was the territory of the house of Saint Prospero, while the northern part was the territory of the house of Saint Theon. The territories of these two families were close to each other. Of course, there was no lack of conflict and friction. There were even several large-scale wars. However, what was interesting was that in the end, the crucial war that caused the house of Saint Theon to lose the northern part of the eastern region was fought with the house of Saint Hilda on the northern frontier. In the war that took place more than 300 years ago, the dukes of the north led the army to defeat the main army of the house of Saint Theon and even killed the judge, Duke Saint Theon. In this war, the Blade of Judgment became the trophy of the house of Saint Hilda. However, the real winner of that war was the mantis stalking the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind, the Saint Pros family. They took advantage of the defeat of the house of Saint Theon and the heavy losses of the army of the north and invaded the northern part of the eastern region. In the end, they completely destroyed the remaining army of the house of Saint Theon and became the only master of the eastern region. However, that was the strange thing. In this war, although the house of Saint Theon lost its territory and its army, the family members did not suffer too many losses. Whether it was the house of Saint Hilda or the house of Saint Prospero, after killing the judge, Duke Saint Theon, they would not break the unspoken rules of the aristocracy and kill the house of Saint Theon. However, the nightmare of the house of Saint Theon began. Without the protection of the castle and the army, the members of the house of Saint Theon were repeatedly assassinated, and the killers could not be found. This incident even alarmed the imperial family of the empire. The San Lorenzo family took the initiative to mediate and severely reprimanded the Duke of St. Hilda and the Duke of St. Prospero, asking them to maintain the demeanor of the winners and forgive the losers. At the same time, His Majesty at that time also took the surviving members of the House of St. Theon into the palace for strict protection. However, this still did not stop the members of the House of St. Theon from dying one by one for various strange reasons. Later, even the Church of Light was enraged by this act of breaking the rules. His Holiness the Pope personally stood up and declared that a noble bloodline like the House of St. Theon would not be allowed to die out. 2 cardinals even went to the northern frontier and the eastern region in person, sternly asking the Duke of St. Hilda and the Duke of St. Prospero to stop this act of breaking the rules. Of course, the 2 dukes kept protesting. In order to clear their names, they even announced the whereabouts of every knight under their command and allowed the church personnel to monitor and search their territories at will. Under the gaze of all kinds of people, the 2 biggest enemies of the House of St. Theon seemed to be closely watched and had no chance to act. Even so, it still could not stop the members of the House of St. Theon from dying one by one. Who was behind the scenes and insisted on killing the House of St. Theon? As for this strange incident, the history books did not give an answer. In the end, this once illustrious paladin family disappeared from the empire without a trace. It was not known whether the family had really been completely cut off, or if they had quietly hidden away. After reading this part of history, Colin's doubts did not lessen. Instead, they increased. In his opinion, the history of the Judgment Blade must have hidden the most important information. And this information might be the real hint that Marquis Garcia had given him. However, this clue could not be found in the history books. This was not strange. The things that were written down were usually what the superiors wanted their descendants to see. The real key was something that only a few people knew. The bloody, dirty, and ugly things that were covered by the fog of history were often the truth of the matter. Closing the book, Colin suddenly turned to Quincy and asked, "What do you think of the demise of the House of St. Thean?" Quincy hesitated for a moment and carefully chose his words. "Lord Viscounts, I think they deserved it." "Oh. Why?" "No matter how they cover it up, Duke St. Thean's killing of the Dark Emperor is an unforgivable betrayal." Colin did not expect Quincy to see this matter this way. However, after thinking about it carefully, Colin suddenly felt that this old man seemed to be referring to something else. Unforgivable? To whom was the most unforgivable act of regicide? Of course, it was the Empire's royal family, the San Lorenzo family. Duke St. Thean's regicide, regardless of the reason, was an unforgivable betrayal to the San Lorenzo family. It severely damaged the prestige of the Empire's royal family. No wonder the House of St. Thean was assassinated after escaping into the palace. So this was the situation. The House of St. Hilda and the House of St. Prospero were probably just hired thugs on the surface. The one who really wanted to end the House of St. Thean was probably the Empire's royal family. Chapter 80. A reindeer suddenly darted out of the lush forest. It ran very quickly, as if it was hiding from an enemy. Whoosh! A sharp arrow pierced through the layers of leaves and accurately pierced through the reindeer's body. Footsteps sounded, and 3 hunters appeared beside the reindeer's corpse. "Sir Rigo, your archery skills are too exquisite. You hit every shot." An attendant carried the reindeer's corpse on his shoulder and praised loudly. The Knight of Rigo curled his lips. "It's just a reindeer, what's there to be surprised about? Hurry up and help me find where there are wild boars in this forest. Today I want to treat Sir Viscounts to roast pig trotters." "Yes, yes." The 3 continued to walk forward. Suddenly, the Knight of Rigo stopped. Because a figure suddenly appeared in front of them. The person was tall and thin, wearing a half-body chainmail with a long sword at his waist. He wore a tight helmet that hid his face. The Knight of Rigo frowned, feeling that this person's appearance was a bit strange. He cautiously asked, "I am a knight under Viscount Angli of Ice Stone City Rigo Morben. May I ask who you are?" The strange person in front of them didn't answer Rigo's question. Seeing this, one of the attendants instantly became angry. "Hey! Rude brat, which mercenary group are you from? Why aren't you answering Sir Rigo's question?" The other side was still silent. The attendant became even angrier and immediately strode forward, trying to take off the strange person's helmet. Rigo didn't stop him, but instead reached for the knight's sword at his waist. "Hey! Do you understand what I'm saying or not?" "Ah!" Amidst the screams, the attendant stepped into the trap, and his right foot was instantly pierced until it was a bloody mess. Clang! Rigo immediately pulled out his sword and said angrily, "Brat, this is the last warning. Take off your helmet, throw down your sword, and tell us your identity. Otherwise, don't blame me for being rude." However, the strange person was still unmoved by Rigo's warning. Rigo didn't speak anymore. He held his breath and focused, holding his sword with both hands as he slowly approached the strange person. But before he could reach the strange man, he heard a scream behind him. Leg abruptly turned around and saw that the other attendant following him had also been ambushed. "Bastard!" Leg roared angrily and was about to go back to save the servant. At this moment, the tall and skinny freak suddenly moved. "I've been waiting for you." Leg didn't panic at all. It was as if he had been prepared for this. He turned around and slashed at his opponent. Clang! The 2 swords clashed. Leg was shocked. "You're a knight." The tall and skinny freak didn't answer. He swung his sword again. The uneasiness in Leg's heart grew stronger. An unfamiliar knight that had suddenly appeared in the outskirts of Ice Stone City, and a third-rank one at that. This obviously alerted Leg. Could it be that there were other lords targeting the Angeli family? Leg immediately recalled that the mastermind behind the assassination of the Viscounts in the Kingdom of Grey Castle had not been caught yet. Could it be? Boom! Leg swung his sword heavily, forcing the mysterious knight to retreat. Then, he did not chase after him. Instead, he turned and ran. The other party had planned this beforehand. This was probably a trap. The Viscounts must be in danger as well. Leg didn't dare to stop. He didn't even care about the two attendants behind him. He broke into a run and ran in the direction of Colin. That mysterious knight also chased after him. With one running and one chasing, the two ran quite a distance. Just as the mysterious knight chased after Leg's footsteps and jumped over a small stream, Leg suddenly stopped in his tracks. Then, he abruptly turned around and swung his sword just as the knight landed on the ground. The mysterious knight didn't dodge and was stabbed in the stomach by Leg's sword. Ha! You didn't expect this, did you? A sly smile appeared on Leg's fierce face. However, this smile quickly froze. Because, the other party actually didn't care about the long sword in his stomach and swung his sword again. This reckless action caught Leg off guard. In order to prevent his forearm from being cut off, he could only let go of his sword. Which family's knight are you? Are you crazy? Seeing the mysterious knight with a sword in his stomach and still chasing after him as if nothing had happened, Leg felt that this world was too crazy. Now that he didn't have a weapon, he didn't dare to look back and could only continue running forward. Whoosh! A sharp arrow shot over, but Leg narrowly dodged it. Not good, this guy has a helper. Leg was scared out of his wits. He realized that he was going to die today. Then, a few more arrows shot out from the forest, causing Leg to be tired of dodging. Soon, the mysterious knight behind him caught up. Chi! Leg screamed in pain. His thigh was cut by the other party. Wait, who are you? At least let me know who killed me. Leg fell to the ground and panted. Unfortunately, the other party didn't care about Leg. Pine! The mysterious knight swung his scabbard and heavily smashed the back of Leg's head. Leg screamed in pain again. Are you trying to knock me out? Can you use more strength? Pine! Another hit. This time, Leg finally fainted. Leg! Wake up! Leg opened his eyes in a daze and saw Colin's face. Sir Viscounts. Leg's consciousness didn't seem to be fully awake. After a while, he finally woke up and hurriedly asked, Sir Viscounts. Are you okay? I was attacked by a mysterious knight just now and almost couldn't see you again. Colin held back his laughter and comforted him, I'm fine. Luckily, I heard your screams and brought people over in time. The knight who attacked you must have heard our movements and ran away. Ran away. Leg had a look of pity. He felt that he couldn't take revenge. Are you okay? You look so pale. Colin asked with concern. I'm fine. My leg is a little injured. It's not a big deal. However, I'm a little dizzy. I probably lost too much blood. Then you should quickly stop the bleeding. Colin waved at a servant behind him, indicating for him to bandage Leg's wound. Sir Viscounts, that mysterious knight is probably a woman. Leg suddenly said. Oh. You saw her face? Colin asked expressionlessly. I didn't. However. Leg rubbed his big bald head. He seemed to have touched the injured area and grimaced in pain. However, when she tried to knock me out, she didn't succeed. With such little strength, she should be a woman. The corner of Colin's mouth twitched. He was a little speechless. Is that so? Then this is indeed a useful clue. Yes. Also, Sir Viscounts, I suspect that this person might be related to the mastermind who tried to assassinate you in Grey Castle. Yes. How about this? It's not safe here. Let's return to Ice Stone City first. You'll be in charge of investigating this matter. All right. Leg gritted his teeth. I must catch that damned female knight. And then smash her head. Chapter 81. The night deepened. There was no moonlight in Ice Stone City tonight, only a few stars. Colin stood on the balcony of the Red Castle and looked into the distance. To the north was the cold and barren sky ice field, and to the east, he could see the edge of the forest. Who knew how many wild beasts were hidden in the dark forest? After passing through the dark forest, he would enter the territory of the half-elf kingdom. Footsteps sounded, and Knight Charles appeared behind Colin. "Sir, you were looking for me. Have a seat." Colin turned around and pointed at the glass of red wine on the table. "Have a drink." Knight Charles was a bit hesitant. "Sir, I've already prepared to stop drinking." "It's fine, just drink less." Colin insisted. Only then did Knight Charles raise the wine glass and lightly touch it with Colin before sending it to his mouth. Colin drank the red wine while paying attention to Knight Charles's reaction. The red wine he gave Charles had poison in it. Of course, this wasn't Colin purposely tricking his blood descendant. It was just that he was doing an experiment. And he had already experimented on blood thralls before and found that they were all immune to poison. Therefore, he felt that higher-level blood descendants should also be immune to poison. "How is it? Are there any changes in your body these past few days?" Colin put down the wine glass and asked. Charles put down the wine glass and excitedly reported his findings to Colin. Through the other's description, Colin learned that Knight Charles's current changes were very similar to his. Photophobia, bloodthirsty, immortality, yes. After Charles discovered that his severed fingers had grown back, he began experimenting on his own body. Then, he discovered that there were no longer any fatal wounds on his body. Of course, unlike the blood thralls, Charles could still feel pain. Colin rubbed his chin and fell into deep thought. Right now, he really wanted to know if a blood descendant could also level up by drinking the blood of a high-level knight. However, Charles was already a third-level knight, and Colin didn't have the blood of a fourth-level knight to experiment on. "Can you control your canine teeth?" Colin asked again. "Tiger fawn." Puzzled, Knight Charles opened his mouth, revealing two inconspicuous canine teeth. "I don't think so." Colin guessed that if a bloodline couldn't control the lengthening of its canine teeth, then it probably wouldn't be able to release blood poison through its canine teeth and create blood thralls. Of course, it would be even more impossible to complete the embrace and create the next generation of blood descendants. After that, Colin chatted with Knight Siar about some matters related to the construction of the cavalry. Seeing that Siar's expression remained the same, completely unaffected by the poisonous wine, Colin confirmed the fact that the blood descendants were immune to poison. "Oh, by the way, do you like hunting?" Colin suddenly asked. Knight Charles froze for a moment and nodded. "I like it. Well, the last time I went hunting with Knight Leg, this guy met a mysterious knight and was beaten up. He didn't have enough fun. I was going to go with him again, but I've been too busy recently. If you have time, accompany him to have some fun." After borrowing blood from Rigo last time, Colin had successfully advanced to the second level. However, he felt that Rigo's blood should be able to help him advance to the third level, so he wanted to borrow it again. However, Colin didn't plan to bring Rigo out to hunt again. That would easily arouse the other party's suspicion. If he was attacked every time he went hunting with Colin, then no matter how stupid he was, Rigo would suspect that the attacker was related to Colin. Therefore, he planned to let Knight Charles lure the Knight of Rigo out. "Okay. Knight Charles didn't suspect anything and naturally nodded in agreement. After sending Knight Charles off, Colin picked up the other party's wine cup and poured the remaining poisonous wine into his mouth. If blood thralls and blood descendants were immune to poison, then he shouldn't have any problems either. Colin thought so. Just as he was carefully feeling the changes in his body, footsteps sounded again. Butler Eamon appeared on the balcony. "Master, you were looking for me?" Colin nodded. "Have a seat." The two sat down on the balcony. Colin clapped his hands and had the maid bring in 2 more cups of red wine and some dried fruit. Of course, there was no poison in the wine this time. The maid quietly placed the things on the table and then quickly left. "You changed all the servants in the castle?" Colin took a sip of red wine and asked. "No, I just changed your personal servants. This is also for your safety, and it didn't cost much." Eamon hurriedly explained. Colin nodded and didn't say anything. The servants in the Red Castle were mostly left behind by the Su Duo family. Colin originally didn't plan to change all of them. After all, the recruitment and training of new servants required money, and the Angeli family's current financial situation wasn't that great. He needed to save as much money as possible and use it in crucial areas, such as the construction of the army. However, he also knew that the old butler had good intentions, so he didn't reprimand him. "How is the new tax officer, Quincy, doing?" "Very good." Eamon smiled and nodded. "Master, you found a very outstanding tax officer." That's good. However, you have to keep an eye on him. I can't completely trust him yet." "I understand." Seeing that Eamon understood his intentions, Colin was relieved. He took out a letter from his shirt pocket and handed it to the old butler. "I just received a reply from Marquis Dawson. He agreed to provide us with war horses and armor. However, the price is a little too high. See if it's suitable." Eamon carefully read Marquis Dawson's reply and thought for a moment before saying, "Master, we can get Marquis Dawson to provide a batch of samples. If the quality of the samples is as he said, and isn't inferior to the standard equipment of the Black Cavalry, then the price isn't too high." "All right, then let him send over a batch of samples first." Colin rubbed his forehead and was somewhat vexed. "But with our family's finances, can we afford this expenditure?" "It's very difficult," Eamon said truthfully. Seeing that Colin was deep in thought, Eamon advised, "Master, forgive me for being blunt, but isn't it a little too hasty to form a cavalry now?" Colin was silent. He understood that Eamon's words made sense. He was indeed a little hasty. If he waited for a year or two, for the territory to recover and for the taxes to be plentiful, it might be more appropriate to form a cavalry. However, Colin couldn't wait that long. He knew that the Duke of St. Hilda and Marquis Garcia had already formed a rift. Although Marquis Garcia didn't seem to have made any moves, as though he had endured his brother's betrayal. However, who knew when a crisis would appear on the northern frontier? At that time, would the Black Cavalry still stand unreservedly on the side of the Duke of St. Hilda, just like the previous 2 times? Thus, Colin felt a deep sense of danger. He had to quickly develop his own forces. Otherwise, he wouldn't even have the right to choose a side and could only go with the flow and be trampled on. Thinking of this, Colin clenched his teeth and said fiercely, "We can borrow money." Chapter 82. Loan. Yes. Use the territory's future taxes as collateral to borrow from merchants. As long as the interest is reasonable, I believe that many large merchant guilds will be willing to help us. The old butler's eyebrows furrowed deeply, somewhat hesitant about Colin's decision. In the knowledge of the people of this world, borrowing money was not something to be proud of. Especially for a noble. This was practically announcing to everyone, "I am in need of money." For nobles who valued reputation, this was a very disgraceful thing to do. Unless they were at a critical juncture where they were about to go bankrupt, no noble lord would borrow money from others. Master, I'm afraid this will affect the Angeli family's reputation. The old butler advised with a face full of worry. Reputation is false. Colin waved his hand, looking as if he didn't care. For a transmigrator like him, borrowing money to develop himself was a matter of course. In fact, those nobles who would rather die than borrow money were the real fools in Colin's eyes. Using other people's money to develop one's own strength was a very smart thing to do. Even if the worst happened and the loan couldn't be repaid, as long as the Angeli family's army developed smoothly, would they still be afraid of people coming to ask them to repay the debt? All right, I've made my decision. Release the news tomorrow. We will organize a gathering and invite some powerful merchant guilds to discuss the details of the loan. Yes, master. Seeing that Colin had made up his mind, Eamon didn't dare to say anything more. The next day, when the news that Viscount Angeli was preparing to borrow money was released, a group of merchants swarmed to Ice Stone City like sharks that smelled blood. Just as these merchants were rubbing their hands and preparing to snatch this deal, a merchant came to the Red Fort first and requested to see Viscount Angeli. Originally, Colin didn't plan to meet any merchant alone. In his opinion, only by gathering these merchants together and letting them compete would he be able to get the best loan terms. However, when the servant told him that the visitor was Oliver from the Tulip Merchant Guild, Colin still agreed to the other party's request. After all, he was an old acquaintance. Although Oliver had offended Colin, his apology was very sincere. In Colin's opinion, this was a person who knew his limits and knew how to do things. Esteemed Viscounts, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to meet me. I feel extremely honored. The fat merchant still had that flattering smile on his face. When he saw Colin, he immediately bowed 90 degrees, his attitude extremely respectful. All right, Oliver, there's no need to be so courteous with me. I also know what you want. Tell me about your Tulip Chamber of Commerce's conditions. If they are suitable, I don't mind borrowing from you on account of our old acquaintance. Oliver chuckled and said, Sir Viscounts, please be at ease. Based on our past friendship, our Tulip Chamber of Commerce will definitely give you the best loan terms. But before that, please allow me to give you a gift. It's a celebration for you being made a Viscount. Gift? Colin suddenly smiled playfully. He remembered that last time, the fat merchant had given him a set of armor as a gift in exchange for his forgiveness. Then, what was the purpose of this gift? There was one thing that Colin was sure of, and that was that Oliver's gift was definitely not a celebration of his promotion to Viscount as he had said. This was simply a bribe. What gift? Colin sneered in his heart. If Oliver thought that a small gift would make him give the Tulip Chamber of Commerce this big loan order, then he was underestimating him too much. Oliver waved his hand behind him. Two servants carried a large box and walked up to him. When the box was opened, a soul-stirring frosty aura assaulted his senses. It turned out to be a set of enchanted armor. Moreover, it was the set that Colin had once asked for the price, but could not afford. If I remember correctly, the price of this set of enchanted armor is 50,000 gold coins, right? Yes, Sir Viscounts. Are you sure you want to give it to me like this? Let me make it clear first. Even if I accept this set of armor, I will not necessarily take care of the Tulip Chamber of Commerce when it comes to the loan. Of course, Sir Viscounts. This set of armor is just to celebrate your promotion as Viscounts. There is no other meaning, and it has nothing to do with the loan. Colin was suddenly puzzled. There was no free lunch in the world. He had always believed in this saying. Oliver had given him such a big gift, how could it be that he did not ask for anything in return? It must be known that 50,000 gold coins was by no means a small amount. When the Angeli family was still a baron, the entire barony's annual tax income was only 3,000 gold coins. Even if he was now a Viscount and his territory had expanded several times, Colin estimated that the annual income of the entire Viscounts would not exceed 30,000 gold coins. Just tell me, who sent this gift? Colin did not believe that Oliver, a steward of the Chamber of Commerce, had the authority to decide this matter. Thinking of the person behind the Tulip Chamber of Commerce, Colin suddenly realized something. Oliver's smile disappeared and his tone became solemn. Sir Viscounts, to tell you the truth, this gift was personally decided by our Chamber of Commerce's president. Who is your president? Hearing this question, Oliver did not immediately answer. Instead, he looked around with a mysterious expression. Colin waved his hand and ordered the surrounding attendants, all of you are dismissed. When only Colin and Oliver were left in the hall, the fat merchant spoke again. Sir Viscounts, our Tulip Chamber of Commerce's president is Madame Penny. Madame Penny? Colin thought for a while before finally finding the corresponding name in his memory. Wasn't this the mother of Colin's brother-in-law whose whereabouts were still unknown? She was also the lover of Count Ullman. Colin suddenly became vigilant. Why did Madame Penny give me such a big gift? Oliver bowed his head. This is Madame Penny's apology to you. What do you mean? Colin narrowed his eyes. Knight Vala has successfully returned to Fallen Eagle City. However, he had followed your father into battle and was unable to protect the Baron. Therefore, Madame Penny is expressing her most sincere apology to you on behalf of her son. Hearing that his brother-in-law who had disappeared for a long time had suddenly appeared in Fallen Eagle City, Colin's eyes began to flicker with a dangerous light. He tried his best to control his anger and asked calmly, is Knight Vala well? Where did he go before? Everything is well with the knight. He was captured by the trolls in the previous battle. Later, when the Black Cavalry caught up with the troll army, he was thrown into the ice field with the other human captives by the trolls. Fortunately, the Radiant Lord protected him and after going through untold hardships, he returned to the northern frontier. Chapter 83. Captured by trolls. And then escaped. Of course, Colin didn't believe a single word of this. In his opinion, after her father died in battle, Vala had probably escaped alone and brought back the news of the Baron's death. This had aroused Count Oman's greed, and he wanted to kill Colin and seize the Angeli family's title. Now, Penny had suddenly sent such a huge gift to Colin through the Tulip Merchant Guild. What was the meaning of this? Was it a deliberate provocation? Or was it because she saw that Colin had succeeded in inheriting the title and was highly valued by the Duke of St. Hilda, and felt that she could no longer do anything, so she began to express goodwill? Does Count Oldman know about this? No. Colin shook his head inwardly, feeling that Count Oman probably did not know that his lover had sent Colin such a huge gift. Because in Colin's opinion, such a move was too unwise. After all, Colin only suspected that the Oman family had tried to assassinate him, and did not have any evidence. He had not told anyone else. Thus, Lady Penny's actions made her seem guilty. As for congratulating Colin for being promoted to Viscounts, or apologizing for his father's death in battle, these were all excuses. 50,000 gold coins. This was definitely not a small sum. Was there a need to spend so much money to congratulate or apologize? With Count Oman's shrewdness and insidiousness, Colin felt that this count would definitely not do such a thing. Colin sneered inwardly. Although he had never met Count Oman's lover, he had already labeled her as a brainless pretty woman, in his heart. Ah! Lady Penny is so considerate. In that case, I'll accept it. Colin revealed a sorrowful expression. But this sorrow did not last long, and was immediately replaced by a Philistine. But, can the armor be exchanged for gold coins? Huh! Oliver was prepared to say some polite words, but now he suspected that there was something wrong with his ears. Isn't this enchanted armor worth 50,000 gold coins? Colin asked with a natural expression. Yes, then I don't want the armor. Just give me 50,000 gold coins. Oliver hesitated for a long time. When he saw that Colin was serious and did not seem to be joking, he nodded with a constipated look. If you insist. I can help you change it into gold coins. Only then did Colin smile and clap his hands. Okay, please thank Madam Penny for me. Although it was very impolite and undignified to exchange a gift from someone else for gold coins, especially in front of them. But Colin didn't care. The expensive cost of building a cavalry unit made him want to sell himself. Now that there was such a rare gift from this foolish woman, of course, he would not let it go so easily. Moreover, with his blood breed's undying characteristic, the enchanted armor was of no use at all. At most, it would only look cool. How could it be more practical than gold? Okay, I will certainly convey it for you. Oliver was speechless at this Viscount who did not play by the rules. But he still took a deep breath and asked. Sir Viscounts, regarding the loan, would you be willing to listen to the conditions of our Tulip Chamber of Commerce? Let's hear it. Having just received a huge sum of 50,000 gold coins, Colin was in a good mood. If the Tulip Chamber of Commerce's loan conditions were reasonable, he was prepared to sign a contract with them for the sake of this big gift. Oliver cleared his throat and solemnly said. Sir Viscounts, our Tulip Chamber of Commerce can provide you with a loan of up to 300,000 gold coins. The annual interest rate is 8% and the term is 10 years. The collateral is the tax revenue of the Viscounts for the next 10 years. Colin had previously asked Damon about the details of this world's loans. Now that he heard the Tulip Chamber of Commerce's conditions, he immediately knew that the other party's request was not excessive. In fact, the quota of 300,000 gold coins had already exceeded Colin's previous expectations. With such a huge sum of money, he could even equip a cavalry army of 1,000 people. Good. Mr. Oliver, you can go back and prepare the loan documents. I can sign them at any time. Yes, Sir Viscounts. Happy cooperation. We will definitely have a very happy cooperation. Colin strode towards Oliver and affectionately shook hands with him. His smile was sincere. After nightfall, the forest on the outskirts of Ice Stone City became even more dangerous. Many wild beasts would begin their own hunts under the cover of the night. Therefore, fire became the best weapon for humans to defend themselves in the forest. Beside the blazing bonfire, the Knight of Rigo and the Knight of Seal were eating barbecued meat and laughing loudly. There were also a dozen or so accompanying guards around them. The hunt this time went very smoothly and they did not encounter any strange people. The Knight of Rigo was very satisfied. After eating and drinking his fill, and chatting about all sorts of things, the Knight of Rigo bid farewell to the Knight of Seal and went into his own tent, preparing to rest. The bonfire was not extinguished, and there were 2 guards left in the camp to keep watch. The night grew darker and the moon shyly hid behind the clouds, making the forest even darker. Is there any movement? One of the guards on duty suddenly asked his companion. His companion, who was about to fall asleep, forced himself to open his sleepy eyes and asked in surprise, "What's wrong?" "I think I heard some movement over there. It's probably some stray cat that smelled the scent of food residue. I'll go take a look." One of them left the bonfire and walked towards the direction of the sound. His companion behind him rubbed his eyes and stretched. Then, when he turned around, he found that the guard who went to check on the situation had disappeared. He was so scared that he quivered. Just as he was about to scream, he found that his mouth was covered from behind. Bang! The back of the head was hit hard and the guard fell to the ground. A tall and thin figure wearing a steel mask appeared behind the guard. She went straight to the Knight of Rigo's tent and went in. The Knight of Rigo, who was sleeping soundly, suddenly felt some movement beside him. He sat up alertly but found that there was no one in front of him. Just as he heaved a sigh of relief and was about to go back to sleep, there was a sudden sound behind his head. Bang! The Knight of Rigo immediately fainted. "Knight of Rigo, Knight of Rigo. The Knight of Rigo opened his eyes in a daze and saw the anxious eyes of the Knight of Seal. He immediately sat up and shouted, "Damn it! Someone broke into the camp last night." Yes, the 2 guards were also knocked out. "Knight of Rigo, are you okay?" Ouch, he felt a dull pain at the back of his head. Could it be that guy from last time? The mysterious knight from last time? Seal had also heard about what happened to Rigo the last time. He was sympathetic but also confused. Why does she keep looking for you? How would I know? Rigo mumbled unhappily. At this moment, he saw that his wrist was bandaged and asked doubtfully, "What happened to my hand?" "Oh, when we came in, we found that your hand was cut, so we bandaged it for you." The Knight of Rigo shook his wrist and felt that it was not a big deal, so he did not take it to heart. He stood up and suddenly felt dizzy. He roared gloomily, "Return to the city immediately. Let's go back to the city immediately. This time, I'll bring the army to search. I don't believe that we can't find that damned female knight." Chapter 84. Outside Ice Stone City, the sound of horse hooves rumbled. The sound of bowstrings rang out continuously, accompanied by the scolding of the officers. "Posture, posture. Don't just focus on aiming, pay attention to maintaining your posture on the horse. Tom. I'm talking about you, damn it. Is your waist broken? And you, Jerry, looks good, they're starting to look good." Colin watched the scene of his first batch of cavalry training from afar and was in a good mood. They're only starting to look good, they're still far from it. The Knight of Charles was clearly still dissatisfied. Colin laughed, "They're new recruits after all, you can't use the black cavalry standards to judge them. I'm already very satisfied that they've become like this in just a month. You guys did well. You flatter us. This is mainly due to your support." The Knight of Charles's words weren't completely flattery. Colin's support for this cavalry was indeed unreserved, giving them people, money, and equipment. He spent the huge sum of money he had just borrowed like flowing water, as if he had no concept of saving. Steward Eamon watched with trepidation, occasionally trying to persuade him. But Colin still did things his way. In his opinion, only the money that was spent could have real value. And, just as a famous entrepreneur once said, the money wasn't really spent, it was just used to stay by your side in another way. In the past, Colin had scoffed at this saying, but now, looking at this batch of cavalry flying past in front of him, he deeply agreed. "Is there a problem with the source of soldiers? I see that you've only recruited about 300 people." After Colin received the huge loan, he increased the size of the cavalry from 100 to 1,000. "Sir Viscounts, the first batch of recruits shouldn't be too large, the training effect will greatly decrease if there are too many people." "Alright, as long as you know what to do." Colin didn't interfere too much with the training of the Knight of Charles, he knew that professional matters should be left to professionals. He really didn't know anything about cavalry training. However, Knight Charles, who was from the Black Cavalry, was an expert in this field. "A few days ago, the Knight of Rigo told me that you stole many of his high-quality recruits." Just as Knight Charles was about to explain, Colin waved his hand and continued. "Don't be nervous. I'm not blaming you. I've already made it clear that the cavalry has priority when it comes to recruiting new soldiers. I'm just wondering why you didn't pick on Leg's veterans, but went to snatch the recruits from him. Lord Viscounts, although the soldiers under the Knight of Rigo are indeed very good, strong, and highly trained, they are still infantry after all. They are used to fighting on foot, and many of their tactical movements have already been formed. They are not particularly suitable to be cavalry. What about the recruits? What kind of recruit is worth fighting over with Leg? A captive who escaped from the Sky Ice Field? Captive? Yes, a batch of captives that the trolls took away when they invaded the northern frontier a few months ago. Later, When Marquis Garcia led his army to catch up with the trolls, these 50,000 captives were abandoned on the ice field by the trolls. During this period of time, many captives have successfully returned alive. Colin finally understood why these escaped captives were fought over by both Leg and Charles at the same time. Because these people were the true warriors who had been through layers and layers of harsh selection. First, the trolls did the first round of selection. When they took captives, they definitely didn't choose the old, weak, or sick, but the young and strong. This way, they could be used as labor. The second round of selection began when these captives were abandoned on the ice field by the trolls. This was an even more cruel and severe round of selection. This didn't only require a strong body, but also a certain amount of intelligence and courage to be able to survive in the harsh cold and hunger. After all, when the trolls abandoned them, they didn't leave any food for them. Therefore, the only way for these captives to obtain food was through hunting. However, there weren't many wild animals on the ice field. If these 50,000 people gathered together, then even if they caught all the animals in the sky and on the ground, it wouldn't be enough to fill the gaps between their teeth. Therefore, the smart ones had to make a choice at this time. Following the main group seemed safe, but in reality, it was just waiting for death. Only by forming small groups and staying away from the main group could they obtain enough food to fill their stomachs through hunting. In reality, from the looks of the captive groups that had arrived in Ice Stone City these days, they were all small groups of less than 100 people. Those with more people would probably have starved to death on the ice field long ago. Those with fewer people would be in danger when they encountered ferocious wild beasts. Therefore, these captives who had successfully escaped from the ice field naturally became delicious cakes in the eyes of Charles and Leg. This was especially true for the core members of each small team. They were the seeds of elite soldiers who possessed excellent decision-making ability and excellent organizational skills. Therefore, when the Knight of Rigo relied on Colin's promise to recruit these captives into the cavalry group, the Knight of Rigo couldn't help but complain to Colin. It couldn't be helped, this large knight was just too greedy. But no matter how greedy he was, Colin wouldn't change his strategy. Cavalry was always the military branch that he was determined to develop first. In this era of cold weapons, the deterrence of a strong cavalry group was too terrifying. Especially in places like the northern frontier and the sky ice field, which were mostly plains. Unless the infantry hid in the city and didn't come out, the cavalry would always be the ruler of the battlefield. After inspecting the cavalry's training, Colin also ran to the infantry's training field to take a look. After all, he couldn't be too biased. After receiving a huge loan, Colin had increased the size of the infantry from the original 1,000 to 3,000. Currently, this number wasn't full yet, only about half of them had been recruited. According to the Mobin brothers' estimates, they should be full in a month. Then, after 3 months of training, they would have a basic combat ability. Although they weren't considered elites, they could still go to the battlefield. After the baptism of a few more battles, those who survived would be elites. The formation of the infantry was fast. In comparison, the cavalry was too slow. According to Charles's estimates, it would take at least a year for the cavalry to reach a level where they could barely go to the battlefield. This was all thanks to Charles and the other outstanding instructors from the Black Guards. If it were Colin, he might not be able to succeed even after 3 to 5 years of tinkering. When inspecting the infantry, Colin also saw the gloomy Knight of Rigo. This large knight had a bad temper recently. Whenever he had time, he would drag the recruits to the forest in the suburbs for training. Of course, Colin knew that this guy was using the training as an excuse to get the recruits to help him search for the mysterious knight who had ambushed him. However, the Knight of Rigo was destined to not be able to take revenge. The blood slave Cynthia was usually hidden in the basement of the Red Castle by Colin. After borrowing blood from the Knight of Rigo twice, Colin had successfully advanced to level 3. If outsiders knew about this speed, they would probably call Colin a genius. After inspecting the infantry's training, Colin returned to the Red Castle. After drinking a cup of deer blood wine, he took an afternoon nap. Colin's days as a hands-off boss were very comfortable. However, his leisurely time was soon interrupted. Butler Eamon hurried over and reported, "Master, a team of trolls has arrived on the icy plains." Trolls? Colin's heart tightened. How many of them are there? About 100 of them. They claim to be messengers heading to chilly winter. They are passing by Icestone City and wish to meet you. Messengers? Colin heaved a sigh of relief. Colin thought for a moment with his chin in his hand before nodding. All right, then I'll meet the trolls' messengers. You're tuning into the Han Lee's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.